Going to get started with the April 18th, 2019 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission. Approval of we'll start with citizens forum. If anybody has any questions or comments about an item that's not on the agenda tonight, you can ask your question or make your comment at this point. But anything that's on the agenda, please wait till we get to that item. And Mark, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Any revisions of the agenda? Have a motion?
Move for approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 3 is approval of the minutes of the March 21st, 2019 meeting. Are there any questions or comments about that from Planning Commission members?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Moving on to item number 3, and I have a few comments I want to make. We've got quite a few people here tonight that I'm sure this is one of the items that you're interested in. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight on this almost holiday weekend. If you have a question or comment, please fill out a blue card and give it back to Mark Shipley. Mark, do you have the cards there or some at the door?
They're outside by the agenda, just right
Okay.
outside the.
So if you haven't filled out one and you want to make a comment or ask a question, do that and then give it to Mark. He's going to call out the names, and we're going to ask that he'll call out maybe 3 or 4 names at a time and let the first person talk and let the others start accumulating at the back there so we don't have to wait for people to get up and get to the microphone so we can move it along. Then when you get up to the microphone, we ask that everybody give their name and their address, please, to do that. And also, we want you to keep your comments to 5 minutes. We have a timer here on the screen. And since we have so many people, please keep your comments to 5 minutes, and then we'll let you know also when your time is up, so to yield the floor to the next person. And please, if you have the same comment or question that somebody else does, when they get through, just wave at us and we'll know that there's more people who are interested in that particular question or comment. And we'll acknowledge the fact that there are more people here that are interested in that. And finally, what we want to do is we'll start out with the town staff talking about this proposal. Then we'll ask you for your questions or comments, but they will answer your questions and comments after everyone gets through talking. And that way they will be able to sort out which one of them has the expertise to answer that question, and we can move it along a little quicker that way. And same thing for Planning Commission members. Lets us wait until after the questions and comments from the residents are answered, and then we'll ask our questions. And have then Daryl or some of the town staff can get up and answer those questions all at one time. So with that, we'll move on to item number 4, discussion on the preliminary road design plan for improvements to Union Road, Town of Farragut applicant. And this is for discussion only. We're not voting on this tonight. We're just gathering information, finding out both from the town staff and the people with the road construction itself. And we're getting more information. There'll be a vote at a later date, and I'm sure you can find that information out closer to the time on the town's website.
Ready, Madam Chairman? All right, thank you so much. David Smoke, Town Administrator here for the Town of Farragut. We did want to talk to you tonight about the Union Road Improvement Project. This is a project that we have been working on since really the first time we had it in our capital improvement program was all the way dating back to fiscal year 2006. So this has been a long time coming. There's been a few projects that have come and gone, before this one that the board felt were higher priority projects over that period of time. But we did wind up putting this in the approved budget back in FY 2016-17. Mark, can you run through the slides for me? I forgot to get the clicker. Back in 2016-17 with engineering, we were able to get grant funding through the state of Tennessee and the Transportation Planning Organization to where we have an 80-20 split on the money that we get. So that was a real benefit and help to us to be able to afford to do this project going forward. The project itself runs from Everett Road all the way down to Hobbs Road along Union, and then down to Kingston Pike. So almost 4,400 feet of improvements to the roadway that we'll be talking about. We have a few pictures to show the current conditions of Union Road. This is roughly a 15-foot wide road throughout this whole entire area. There is no pedestrian access or facilities or anything like that as well along the roadway. So why did we need to improve it? We know that the volumes of traffic along this road are going to be far greater than they are today. We've got a couple of developments that are going on right along this stretch of roadway. And so we did need to try to get the improvements done as concurrently as we could with those improvements as well. So when we first start looking at projects and looking at how we are going to design them, what we do is we look at several different manuals, guides, things that we have as a town, things that the state of Tennessee requires. We have to marry all those things together. We have to work through the guidelines to make sure that when we do improve roads, that it's not just for roads, it's also for, not just for motorists, it's also for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. The town has had a long-standing policy dating back to 1997 with the pedestrian circulation plan that we try to put trails in with road improvements. And we tried to, and then back in 2010 with the bicycle and pedestrian plan, we also included complete streets, and you'll hear a lot about complete streets from different organizations. But basically that means that we not just have roads, but we also have multimodal. We want to make sure that various projects or various people through walking, running, biking can get through the same area. One of the most recent projects that we've had that meets this multimodal design phase and design what we're trying to do is Old Stage Road from, if you look at Watt Road going down to where it extends down a little further into Old Stage toward Fort West subdivision. That project there had not only wider roads, 12-foot lanes, but also had 4-foot bike lanes and it had 5-foot sidewalks on both sides. This allows for multimodal transportation along that section of corridor. So one of the things that we wanted to do early on was talk to residents about, okay, what do you want to see for this corridor? We had a first meeting on this back in March of 2017 with the residents in the area just to kind of get some feedback. And one of the things we heard from them is we didn't want to have a highway, a speed zone out there. We wanted to try to slow traffic down if at all possible. How could we design things to slow traffic down? And so one of the first things we did was request from the Tennessee Department of Transportation some design exceptions in order to try to do just that. One of those design exceptions was to add roundabouts, if possible, on the design. And the other one was to get a design speed lower than what they would typically allow for, which was down to 30 miles an hour. And they were agreeable to both of those things. So originally, back in November of last year, we had designed 3 roundabouts along this corridor at the various entrances to the subdivisions. And after public comment and after getting comments back from the public over about a 3 or 4 week period, we realized that the 2 entrances at the current subdivisions of Fox Run and Saddle Ridge were not desirable, were not wanted by those residents. So we were able to take those out and make it more of a regular, road widening type of project. But we did keep the roundabout there at the new entrance to where the future Ivy subdivision is going to be. One of the things about that and about getting the design exception, if you look at the screen, the bottom of your screen shows the actual cross-section for Old Stage Road. And the top screen shows the actual cross-section for what we're looking at for Union Road. And the big difference is that we're able to take the bike lanes out of the roadway and really narrow the typical road width from 12 feet lanes to 11 feet lanes, giving you about 10 feet less asphalt in the roadway. And one of the things that we needed to do then in order to allow for the multimodal aspect of things is put a trail or a multimodal path on one side of the road. And so we were looking at a 10-foot trail on the north side of the road along the entire section of this stretch. And then there's also a grass strip that we're trying to have. The town standards are 6 feet. We're looking to adjust that and make that a little bit wider on this project if possible, as many places as possible, so that street trees can be planted and hopefully live longer than some street trees last right now. And so we think with a wider grass strip there, we'll be able to have more of these trees survive long term and grow up to be nice specimens someday. Some of the project funding for this project, just show it to you real quick. We're looking at engineering, right-of-way, and construction. It's around a $4.5 million total project when it's all said and done, with 20% of that being Town of Farragut local match. Some of our project timeline for this project, we're looking at engineering phase right now. We're technically in what's called the NEPA phase, and that's an environmental phase. NEPA takes quite a bit of time to go through, and so we're looking at about a 36-month start to finish review of that, and we're kind of right toward the kind of middle to a little over halfway through that point right now. About a year from now, what we hope is that once we get approval, from all the bodies, not only Planning Commission but TDOT, then we can start final design on that and eventually get to where we can start buying right-of-way. And then once all the right-of-way is purchased and easements for the area, then construction will take 14 to 18 months. And that kind of gives you a broad timeline of when we think right now all those things could be done. Tonight, what we're looking for is really the MPC's direction on any kind of changes you'd like to see. If there's any kind of adjustments that need to be made or tweaks to the project. We feel like all of the things that you're going to see in the plans tonight meet TDOT's expectations of what we need. There is one thing that we're slightly concerned about, and that comes down to there's some sections of the trail and the multimodal path that are going to be right up against the roadway. TDOT just came out back in February of this year with a multimodal transportation plan guide that's a little more detailed than they've had in the past. And one of the things they talk about is if you have a trail next to the road, then it may require a barrier of some kind. And so what we are trying to avoid, if at all possible, is any kind of guardrail, concrete barrier, whatever that may be, along that roadway. And so that may be something that we have to look into and certainly try to get with them on to see what the possibilities may be. But with that, that's all we have for our presentation tonight. We have a couple slides here that may be tough to see with the lights on as bright as they are, but this gives you the whole cross-section of one half of the road leading from Hobbs Road all the way toward the roundabout, and then the next slide will give it to you all the way from the roundabout down to Everett Road. And again, I apologize, it's hard to put that much map on the screen in much detail. But a lot of you have your packets, and I know we've been able to get a lot of the plans out to the residents out there as well that were having concerns about that. So hopefully they have a chance to look at their individual properties if that affects them, and obviously have questions for all of us tonight. So with that, I will end my presentation, and we'll be happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Darrell, do you have anything at this time?
I really have nothing to add unless you have questions.
Okay. Then we'll move along to, is anyone, anyone in the audience have any questions or comments at this point?
Well, got the blue cards.
Card.
You ready?
Okay.
All right, like Chairman suggested, I'll call out three names, so the other two can get ready. The first name's Tim Sayers, then Charlene Trout, and then Kevin Riley.
Is it possible for me to defer till after Mrs. Trout speaks?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. If that's okay with her, I mean, I'm just speaking for procedure, it's fine.
I'm Charlene Trout. I live at 12817 Union Road, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my husband, Jack Trout. The Union Road project will impact directly 14 property owners or families on Union Road and indirectly impact hundreds of families that live in Saddle Ridge and Fox Run subdivisions. On February the 15th, a letter from Darrell Smith and Matt Brazil was mailed to only a small number of property owners. It was stated that staff, quote, staff would provide the new drawings for additional public review once available, unquote. Tonight, only a small handful of people even know the plans were available on the website. Notification alerts of this meeting and the agenda were only made public Monday, which was 3 days ago, a much shorter amount of time than other notification alerts. It is also taking place right before a long holiday weekend when a lot of people already had other plans. Due to the procedures that have just taken place and the perception it leaves, the discussion tonight about Union Road needs to be tabled, or 2 more published meetings need to be held before it is voted on. While we appreciate the town's goal, and when I say we, I'm talking for my husband and I, while we appreciate the town's goal for traffic safety and speed control, the project is beginning to resemble another Everett Road. We agree the road needs to be widened, and a line in the middle to distinguish the lanes needs to be placed. We have lived on Union Road for 44 years since we have been married, or witnessed only 3 wrecks during that time in front of our property. Last Friday afternoon, there was another wreck, again on the new Everett Road. We don't need or want another Everett Road. A comment heard many times, quote, "We didn't get Everett, Old Stage, or McPhee roads right. We need to get Union Road right," unquote. This needs to be done. We also appreciate the town's desire for providing connectivity between subdivisions. That connectivity already exists between Saddle Ridge and Fox Run, now with sidewalks. And when the Ivy Farm is developed, there will be connectivity with all 3. A 6-foot sidewalk on Union Road is acceptable, but the overkill design is not necessary. As it stands now, residents of Saddle Ridge and Fox Run have to walk in the street of their respective subdivisions 7/10 of a mile until they get to Union Road. The entire Union Road project is only 8/10 of a mile in length, and let me say that I was originally told that the project would go to down Hobbs Road, then I was backed off and said it went to Everett Road to Hobbs Road, and now tonight I heard back to Kingston Pike again. So, but between Everett Road and Hobbs Road, it is only 8/10 of a mile. The town's goals can be met without the extreme design. Every existing property owner that chose to live, buy, or build here around Union Road did for their own personal reasons. While we appreciate the town's visions for new, undeveloped land, the existing property owners impacted that have lived here and or made a living here, and that includes my husband and I, have made a living here for years and even before there was a town of Farragut, have rights and wishes that need to be considered. The town represents them also and needs to advocate for their rights and keep the impact as minimum as possible in their future development and visions. Future development and visions needs to be balanced and respect shown to the current property owners. A lot of people chose to live on or off of Union Road because they loved the area as it is, not for future visions. Thank you.
Okay, Tim Sayers.
Good evening. Tim Sayers, 12812 Pecos Road. I'm here for 2 reasons about Union Road. One is my own personal interest, and the other is to help support our neighbors, the Trouts, who have been wonderful neighbors to Saddle Ridge neighborhood, and I think we owe our support to them for that. I've got no objection to Union Road being improved. Time marches on, things need to change, so this is not a comment of don't improve Union Road. This is more a comment of let's do it the right way. The proposed design really is not in character with the area. One of the reasons that we bought in Saddle Ridge was the character of the general area, the somewhat rural nature of it. So, the design that we've seen really doesn't fit into that feel for the area. As Mrs. Trout said, we don't want another Everett Road. We don't want another McPhee Road. They're basically highways, and we don't want that in there. We need to do everything we can to make sure that the speed limit on that road is kept down to a realistic and reasonable speed with it. One of the things I would like to ask the town is if they've asked for a variance on the width of the multi-use path. I know that they asked for a variance on the road width and got it from TDOT and went from, I believe, 12 to 11, and we appreciate that. But has the town asked for a variance, or is the town the one that's pushing for the 10-foot path?
We're taking notes.
Okay, so someone will answer that at some point?
Right, right. Like I said, we'll
Okay,
answer
great.
all questions at the
Fair enough, just want to make sure we covered that. So, we would like to see, just as they've narrowed the lanes, we would like to see the grassy strip narrowed. I know there's some concern. The gentleman that spoke before me talked about, making it wider so trees would live. I'm not an expert on that, but I personally would be very fine with a 6-foot grass strip in there with it. And then I'm asking that we would look at a variance on the multi-use path. 10-foot just seems very wide. The limited number of people we see using paths on Everett Road or McPhee, I think could easily get by on a much narrower path with it. So in closing, please ask to do everything we can to keep it in character with the area and to minimize the impact to the homeowners along it. And if possible, some of the mature trees that are in there, because all of those really contribute to the feel of the area, and that's one of the reasons that we bought there. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you,
The
Tim.
next is Kevin Riley, and then after that, Bert Bogard.
Thank you. This is Kevin Riley. I live at 12600 Comblain Road in the Fox Run neighborhood. Let me start by echoing some of the comments that were just previously made. I want to thank the town, particularly town engineer and many of you folks. There's been a lot of progress made in dialing down the design since many of us saw it back in November of last year. Definitely in the right direction, and I just want to thank you all for that effort that has gone into that. I do feel, and I want to second or third the comment, I think we still need to work a little harder on the 10-foot multi-purpose path. I expressed that many times, and I would like to agree that I think if a variance hasn't been asked for, we need to definitely ask for a variance to dramatically reduce that down. 10-foot to me is far beyond what you need for the neighborhoods that we have there. Something in the neighborhood of 6 or even maximum of 8 feet, but 6 foot would be ideal. Again, with autonomous cars coming here in the near future, the likelihood of people unfortunately being out on the roads or out on the sidewalks are going to diminish. We just need to be realistic about that. And so we already have connectivity by greenway paths between neighborhoods, and we certainly will with the Ivy Farm connecting all 3 neighborhoods. And I just don't see a need for that wide of a multi-purpose path. And I understand there's a complete street guideline that is used. However, I would strongly encourage you guys to look at a variance to that as well, to consider reducing the diameter or the width of the multi-purpose path. I'd also like to ask that you look at the design of the multi-purpose path as it runs in front of the Fox Run neighborhood, particularly right in front of the corner property, the Blatts that live on the corner there. As that path runs along the road, it does run right next to the road right at the entrance. I'd like to see us make sure that path stays along the road until we get to the corner stake, the back left corner stake of the Blatts property. Otherwise, that multi-purpose path and the grassy strip or whatever will be right up against their fence line or their property line, allowing people that are walking along that strip to look right into their backyard. So if you could keep that thing tucked in a little closer to the road, for just maybe 10 or 15, 20 feet more, whatever it takes to get to that corner stake, and then you can gradually move back out. Also, I'd like to mention that I know in the response to the comments that were made, there was some discussion about stop signs and that, and still am not clear as to what the vehicle count is and what the requirements are for stop signs. I'm definitely concerned at the entrance of Fox Run, if the vehicle count is going to increase like it's projected, that in the very near future, perhaps right at the end of that project, that we're going to be needing a three-way stop at that entrance. So I would like more detail on what qualifies for a three-way stop there. Certainly they're effective, somewhat effective, if you will, on the Smith Road, in at least slowing people down. I've seen people run through those stop signs as well, but at least they slow down. So there's definitely some benefit there. The last thing I want to mention is I would appreciate if the town, when the construction is going on, to work with the HOA board, which I'm a member of Fox Run, because we want that island that is now designed in the front to be plantable, not concrete, to be plantable with low bushes or hedges, and perhaps our board would consider allowing a irrigation line to run across or under the road from our irrigation system that's right there, so that we can keep that plantable island that's in front of the entrance of Fox Run irrigated, so those bushes can survive. Obviously, the Fox Run neighborhood wants to have a nice entrance, and we want to work with the town to see that happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Bert Bogard, and after him, Mike Rothman.
Well, let me say first, thank you, Town of Farragut, for the excellence in engineering and planning. Since I moved here, I've seen this, and I think you're very good. I am a professional engineer. I do have a couple of concerns.
State your address, please.
Oh, yeah, 701 Hunting Fox Lane and Fox Run. Okay. What else you want? So, I'm concerned, and Louis responded to a request I had also about, I know that if you got 500 families coming in to Everett Road, it's potential that you're going to have a backup at, early, and school children and others going to work. So you have to do something about that, and I believe that you did when you provided access to Kingston Pike. That's good. But just a couple of days ago, I learned you're not going to have a traffic light there. Why? So I'm sure it hinges on the MUTCD, and I don't have a copy of that, but I'd like to know why we can't have a traffic light on Kingston Pike, because the people turning left going to work and school, how are they going to do that? It's going to challenge everybody to Everett Road. No, it won't work. I don't think.
Are you talking about going through the new development that's going to be on the Swan property? There won't be a traffic light there? Is it
Yeah, that's what I heard. I don't know.
Okay.
So anyway, that's my only concern, and I appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I have Mike Rothman, and after Mike is Jim Boland.
Okay. I'm Mike Rothman. I live at 659 Burchard Boulevard, which is in the Fox Run subdivision. I also thank you for allowing this forum. I do have a few concerns. Bert touched on a few. We're going to have 245 new homes coming in with the Ivy Farm and Ivy Village. If there are no and you're going to have Sedgefield people that are going to go east. You're going to have Saddle Ridge people going east. How are we going to get out of our subdivision, particularly if there's no red light? As Bert so eloquently pointed out, the people are going to want to go east, and they don't want to fight the traffic. So naturally, if I'm in Saddle Ridge, I'm going down in front of Fox Run. If I'm in Sedgefield, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'd like to also impose upon you to consider putting a traffic light, certainly at that new road that you're proposing that leads into into Ivy Farms and the village. The other thing is that I'm a big proponent of trees. And I really would like to impress upon the Planning Commission, and when we get the BOMA, and when we get the architectural review, but to put trees up, to put trees around the multipath, require the developer to do this, to protect the privacy of the Saddle Ridge residents, as well as the Fox Run residents, and any other developments that you put up. I hate to continue to allude to the Everett Road, but it's sinful what happened to the residents of Fox Run that border Everett Road. What has happened to their property value, in my estimation, without the trees up there, without some. So I'd like to impose upon any developer, whether it be for the roads or whether it be for the community that they wish to develop, that there are trees, substantial trees, whether it's I'm getting to be really cognizant of a lot of them. The green giants, I thought that was a green bean, and your Leland cypress, the ones that would really give us a buffer off of that. So I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate your considering what we as residents are, and I think that the first obligation from the town is to the community that already exists, and it's not to the developer that wants to come in. They need to tailor their community to the needs and the confines of us, to protect our property value, to protect the residents, so that we have a good quality of living, which we are so proud of in Farragut. Thank you so much.
The next speaker is Jim Bolin, and after Jim, it's Jay Kendall.
Good evening. I'm Jim Bolin. I live at 12708 Golden Fox in Fox Run subdivision. So first, I'd like to thank the town, the engineers, the managers for the changes that have been made from the original plan that had 3 roundabouts and 0.8 of a mile. A number of residents submitted comments, and the folks listened to it and made the changes. So that was an improvement. One of the suggestions was looking at Calming Island as a means of slowing down traffic, and appreciate the fact that that was inserted in there just to the west of the Fox Run entrance. It's obvious there was consideration for safety with the potential turn-in lane coming from west to east on Union Road turning into Fox Run. So those are all positive things. As you've heard, and I've listened to various residents in Fox Run, there are concerns about the width of the multi-use path, the 10-foot width and the 8-foot grass strip. Certainly the 8-foot grass strip provides the opportunity to put trees and try to maintain some of the rural feel of Union Road. The one commitment I have not heard is the town going to truly budget to put trees in that 8-foot strip? I've asked the question. There's been indications that, yeah, sometime in the future we'll make a budget for those trees. But the one question was, in this budget, was there an allowance to plant the trees after the road construction is complete? There's a concern by residents that the road construction finishes up. There's an 8-foot wide grass strip. Years go by and everybody's forgotten about the commitment for trees. So I asked that be defined and identified, how the town will assure the residents along Union Road that trees will get planted in there. I think there is a legitimate argument to look again at the 10-foot wide multi-use path. The path on Everett Road is, I'm told, is about 8 feet wide. And based on the traffic you see on that path on Everett Road, it can readily handle what's going on there. Not a lot of people use it. You're not getting a lot of two-way traffic with bicycles on there. Probably at best you get one-way traffic with bicycles, one-way traffic with some joggers, one-way traffic with some dog walkers. That 8-foot wide path seems to be able to capably handle what's there. Even adding another 200-plus families in Ivy Farms is not going to increase the path on this multi-use, not going to increase the use on the multi-use path along Union Road. I think there are areas where you could alter the width, so take into consideration such as the Blatt family that lives on the corner of Brochart and Union, where this, if the path butts right up against their fence line, and the issue that they have is when people go strolling by there, not only can they look in and invade their privacy, but it'll make a handy place to just toss their water bottle or their soda can. So I think that it needs to be looked at and in all consideration. I have concerns, having heard that a barrier may be put up between the path and the road. That'll be utterly horrible. And I think if there's an issue at TDOT about the pathway right against the road, then you need to look at reducing the width of the pathway in that section so that you don't have to put a barrier up there. I mean, that guardrail barrier will just be horrendous and will truly destroy, take away from any tree that's planted there. Lastly, the information that there's no stoplight at the future, I'll call it Ivy Road, that connects from Kingston Pike to the Ivy Farm or Ivy Farms. If there's truly not a stoplight out on Kingston Pike, that's just going to further increase traffic coming down off of folks coming from Lenore City. Coming down, they're going to zip in and come down Union Road and bypass all of that to get into Turkey Creek and other parts of Farragut. I think the town needs to look very seriously and plan on putting a stoplight out at that road that I guess it's going to connect across from Way Station Trail. Otherwise, you're going to defeat and just add even more traffic to the Union Road. Thank you for your time.
Okay, the next speaker's Jay Kendall, and then after Jay is Russ Buchanan.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Jeffrey Kendall. I live at 12804 Pecos Road in Saddle Ridge neighborhood. I'm here on behalf of myself as a resident of Saddle Ridge and also on behalf of my wife. So at this point, many of the pertinent points have been made. It's easy for me to kind of come up here and back clean up, but one common thread that I heard, especially from commenters like Mr. Sayers and Mrs. Trout, was sort of this dynamic that's at play between where the town is going via this planning commission, per the comprehensive land use plan, and kind of how we perceive our neighborhood and the essence of our neighborhood in West Farragut. It is very rural. We talked about a 15-foot road that runs along Union, right? It's very quaint. It's romantic in a way with the horses, and Ivy Farms is coming in. 250 homes are coming in. But to go to a 53-foot footprint from 15 is somewhat dramatic for those of us who live in West Farragut and who bought, as Mr. Sayers said, in that area for a particular reason. It was for that quasi-rural feel, despite having, a developed neighborhood like we have. So I think that dynamic is playing out. I think that's one that, personally, on behalf of my wife and myself, we would like to keep the rural, rural, local essence of West Farragut. That's why we bought there. One other point that I wanted to make was related to the town's vision. The town has this vision of interconnectivity, and I understand that. I understand this commission is bound to work towards that plan that's been adopted by our town in 2012. I moved from Denver, Colorado, lived downtown, so the true essence of connectivity, I was right in the heart of it. So to the extent that's already been achieved, the interconnectivity at the top of the neighborhoods, and will be achieved through Ivy Farms, I'm hoping that that can be taken into consideration to hopefully lessen through a variance or otherwise the 10-foot walking path. How that actually plays out to reduce that 53-foot footprint, that's up to the engineers and up to this commission, but strongly stand in support of something much less cumbersome and onerous than what is currently being proposed. The second reason I'm here is to support the neighbors of ours, the Trouts, who are undoubtedly going to be the most impacted by this. And we moved in 2 years ago. Our property on Pecos Road actually abuts the Trouts. And they were more than kind when we moved in. They've proven to be good friends of my wife and myself. They've been tremendous to my daughter. And this plan will undoubtedly have significant impacts for Fox Run and for Saddle Ridge, but will have tremendous impacts on the Trouts. And that's tough for us. And I know if my wife was here, she had to stay home with the little one, she'd be speaking to that and how important that is. We have a path that's going to come up Hobbs and essentially cross over directly in front of their property and cut into their property more so than any other of the 14 residents on that road. So I know Mrs. Trout did not make it completely personal when she got up here, because that's how she's wired, and we appreciate that about her, but I felt the need to bring that up. To the extent that the crossover could be pushed down a ways, or the engineering behind how the path sits on the north side of the road could be reconsidered or taken into consideration, I think would be in good taste, and I think it would be proper for, you know, a family that developed that property in the 40s and ended up, you know, selling it to the developers of Saddle Ridge. So I think it's important as we move forward with the town of Farragut to keep in mind the people who were here, were part of the fabric of the development of Farragut, and I hope that's not lost on this commission as you make decisions on this final preliminary design. Thank you.
Russ Buchanan, and after Russ is Melissa Bowles.
Hi, Russ Buchanan. I live at 663 Brochart Boulevard in Fox Run. And I would like to echo Ms. Trout's and Mr. Trout's concerns about the processing and posting of this meeting. I think it's much too hasty. It's much too inconvenient for the folks whom you're going to affect by hearing. If you have a meeting that is scheduled so quickly and beginning before the weekend, that's a holiday weekend. I know many people are probably at church tonight. It is Monday, Thursday. And they're not showing up because they have other commitments that are more important than coming down and making an argument to the Farragut Planning Commission. And so I think in the future there needs to be much more notice. There needs to be much more consideration to all the residents that are affected by whatever plans the commission is considering. Now, the Union Road planning is gone much too fast. We said that to Mr. Brazil, the Fox Run residents that I spoke with, and that was moving much too fast, and we said that. We have been waiting on revised plans. Those are coming in January. Oh, they're coming in February. And now it's almost the end of April and we're seeing revised plans. We do appreciate as residents the changes that have been made, but there's more work to be done. There's much more work to be done because the plans as laid out take this road from a country road, local traffic feel to something like Everett. And Everett, as we all know, is also a designed road at 30 miles an hour, which is the plan for Union Road. And so it's posted at 30, which means it's designed to up to 45. And I would challenge any of you to go out and wonder why no one walks on Everett Road if you would go out there and walk on Everett Road. It's often 50, 60 miles an hour. Often. And so if that's your plan for Union Road, no one wants it. No one wants an interstate running through the country. No one does. So there's much more work to be done on these design plans. And so I have a specific question for the town administrators and the engineers as to how they determine that Union Road is a local collector road versus being a local rural road, because those design requirements are very different if you look at it as a major collector, as opposed to local rural traffic. And if I can, Mr. Whiting, it'd be great. We could get you a cup of coffee. This is an important meeting. I've had many sleepless nights. I would appreciate it, as I'm sure everyone else would, if you could stay awake and listen to our comments. It's important. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, then Melissa Bowles.
Melissa Bowes, live at 12608 Union Road, which is right on the very corner of Everett and Union. My concern, in which a lot of it is your speed. You may have designed it for 30 miles, thinking average speed's only going to be 42, 45. Doesn't happen. I have met, even though there is a double yellow line, I have met people passing other cars because they don't want to take the time. And you don't need to make Union Road like that. My other concern is you're going to have more traffic flow. And there are wrecks on that corner of Everett and Union. They wind up in our yard. And my husband keeps up and mows that ditch. We don't have eyes in the back of our head. I don't know that anything can be done at that corner. Someone had mentioned a three-way stop so residents in Fox Run can get out. They won't let me out of my driveway. They would rather back it up and not take. I take the courtesy on Grisby Chapel to slow up, blink my lights to let these people out of their subdivisions. And I'm not trying to sound selfish, but that is part of what that does go on.
That's all that signed up for this item.
Any of you all that are going to answer some questions, come on up there, please.
Good evening. I'm Darrell Smith, town engineer. What would you, if you have any questions, just feel free.
We'll start out with, does anybody on the planning commission have any questions for Darrell and the engineer?
I do. The common denominator that I'm hearing tonight is we have a road profile that is wider than what the residents want. To put it in real simple terms, Darrell, what are our options to still receive the 80% funding and not and be able to shrink the road profile?
Well,
I'm talking about cross section
the
specifically.
cross-section. To shrink the width of the road is, we're at our minimum right now. I don't know if I've mentioned before in other meetings, we requested a design exception to go with 10-foot lanes.
Okay.
That was rejected.
And that's where we ended up with the 11-foot lanes.
That's how we wound up with the 11-foot
Let's
lanes.
talk about the grass strip and the multi-use path.
Sure.
And what are our options specifically with that and the TDOT funding?
Well, the shared use path provides both bike and pedestrian facilities. It's different from even a greenway in that bicyclists are certainly welcome on it. TDOT's requirement for that is a 10-foot width, 10 feet of hardscape, asphalt in this case. They do point out that in certain circumstances, if there is a severe constraint, you can request more or less a design exception to go to 8 feet at that severe constraint. We contacted TDOT to find out what is a severe constraint. Is it because a lot of people don't want it? No. They're referring to something that it might be a very expensive utility that can't be moved without huge expense. Then you can pinch it down to 8 feet just at that location.
Okay.
We would also have to, they would want to see justification in a study. The fact is, we don't have any severe constraints, anything that would qualify for that on this project. Now, another one might be if the side of the road was a rock wall, rather than blast the rock out to get your 10 feet in, they'll let you go in just at that point to 8 feet. But other than that, that's it.
So you're saying you think it would be possible we could get to an 8-foot trail? I'm going to call it a trail. It's a multi-use path.
It is not possible.
It is not possible to get to 8 feet.
Right. I'm saying there's not, the only way that you can go less than 10 feet,
Is
they will let you go to 8 feet at the exact location where you have a severe constraint. We don't have any.
What about the grass strip?
The grass strip, TDOT requires a 5-foot lateral clearance between the edge of the travel lane and the edge of the path.
Okay.
Now, we have a requirement, the town does, of a minimum of 6 feet. On this project, because so many people had said we don't want to see this ocean of asphalt, we want to be able to plant trees along that 8-foot strip. 8 feet is a lot better for trees than a 6-foot strip. So that's why we're pushing for this. It's also any amount of lateral clearance from the road just makes it more safe.
Is a bar ditch in lieu of curb and gutter, is that even possible, or is that out of the question for this funding?
A ditch?
A ditch.
I don't think you would be able to, well, you would have 8, 10 feet. It would be hard to get a real ditch in there between.
It's going to eliminate the trees. It would eliminate planting trees, but I'm thinking about if TDOT requires 5 feet of separation between the edge of asphalt and the multi-use path, all of a sudden we might be able to start shrinking this down on this road diet by being able to eliminate a couple of feet, usually 24 inches of curb and gutter.
Right. We would, if we eliminate the curb and gutter, we're looking at paved shoulders.
Okay.
And I think for collector roadway, that's, I want to say, is it a 10-foot shoulder with 8-foot paved?
So you're saying we're going in the wrong direction now?
We're going in the wrong direction.
Okay, now
with
we're
that.
swelling the road instead of shrinking it.
Now, the curb and gutter keeps everything contained much better than a regular rural section.
May I add, the 10-foot trail is considered multi-directional, and so that's why you only see it on one side. And it gives us the option of not having something on the other side. So if you have an 8-foot, basically what you're doing is you're putting street trees in, and you can put street trees on the other side, and you're creating a 27 feet. Instead of the closer you move that path, you're creating that 10-foot, it's turning into 37 feet, which is the problem with Everett Road. It feels like a massive concrete. You separate that enough, you get your street trees in. Yes, they'll take some years to grow, but that's not a reason not to put in street trees. I mean, you look at Fox Run, once upon a time, those trees were really small, and now you have a beautiful boulevard. You also have to consider, this is the reason we got funding was because this is a multimodal transportation. Each should be considered equally. The pedestrian, the bicyclist, and the vehicle. That's how they're looking at multimodal from those safety standards. The more separation you have, the safer a transportation system you have. And you've got to consider the whole multimodal network in this. Pedestrians are the most vulnerable user of this multimodal system, so they deserve some consideration. We've gotten down from 21 feet of paved surface to accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists to 10 feet. That's more than a 50% reduction. The design speed, it has been reduced from 40 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour, which is absolutely unheard of in TDOT history. They don't do it. We got a design exception that they have never permitted in the past. Everett Road is a 40 mile per hour design speed. Union Road is a 30 mile per hour design speed. It gives us a little bit more flexibility in the lateral and the vertical and the horizontal that we wouldn't have had with a 40 mile per hour design speed. So it is built to be a slower road than Everett Road. I think our issues are where we have pinch points. The Trout's property, we have to balance the impact on them with pedestrian safety, as well as in front of Fox Run. I don't want to see any kind of barrier go up. It would be absolutely unattractive and unappealing. You do have to have, with the 2.5 feet of gutter, you have to have at least 2.5 feet of grass strip. You have to balance that with, we have that issue on Everett Road. The closer you put that trail to Union Road, the more massive concrete you have visually.
And you're not going to get a tree to grow in 2.5 feet.
And you're not.
It's not going to work.
So I really would love to see us be able to retree that area, bring back trees, because we're going to lose a lot of trees just in trying to put that road in. People say we got to get Union Road right. Yes, we do have to get Union Road right. We have some constraints here. We have to do 11-foot lanes. They allow us to do 30 mile per hour design speed. This 10-foot trail, I'm hearing that it's not, we have two options. 5-foot sidewalk, which that's not an adequate facility for that area. 10-foot trail is the other option. You put it to one side. What people are forgetting is, or maybe are not aware of, we are in competition with Maryville and Oak Ridge and Hardin Valley for residents. And the biggest buying block of people who are purchasing home now are millennials. They're looking for amenities. They're not looking for big houses on big lots. We have homes in Fox Run, the entrance of Fox Run, the beginning, that are nearing 30 years of age. An adequate facility, a beautiful road, is going to bring those houses back into, this is a marketable amenity for them. if we do it right. Now, I don't know what right is, but I know 40-mile-per-hour design speed, 12-foot lanes is not right. And I fought like hell to get the design exception. I worked my butt off to get that design exception. I had to get a lot of education. I had to, and Scott Meyer helped me get the residents behind that. This is the sticking point, is this 10-foot shared use path. And I can't understand why we're trying to negotiate on the pedestrian aspect of it, because that's what people are looking for. When they're looking at houses, they're looking for those amenities.
You also have to remember that we're getting the bikes out of the roadway and onto that multimodal path. I mean, it's not just pedestrians.
Is your mic on, Ed?
I said, yeah, I think it's on. We got a
You're
green
gonna
light.
speak in it.
No. That's a weak micro. I just remind everybody that multimodal path also gets the bikes out of the roadway. And,
Well, not the like.
if we had to dedicate a labeled bike path in that roadway, it would be a wider road.
Harold?
Well, then we would be looking at Old Stage Road.
I have a question
Yes.
of Daryl. I suppose this has been considered, but I haven't heard the answer. I understand that the Trout's property from several folks is the most impacted along that stretch of road. Is there any reason that the road cannot be designed to take more of the south side than the north side?
Right now, I think it's probably pushed as far south as it can be. And in fact, most of the impact along the Trout's frontage is within public right-of-way. In fact, as it's designed right now, we're not actually purchasing right-of-way, we're purchasing slope and construction easements.
I understand that, but you'll have to purchase some right-of-way on the north side, won't you?
It's a grading issue. Can you
It's-
explain the grading issue we're having on the north side, the south side?
Right, it's a grading issue tying driveways in on the north side. On the south side, if we push it to the south. It's already about as far south as it can be right there. Fact is, this design is using the public right-of-way that's already there. Now, it does require slope and construction easements, but we're requiring that on both sides of the road the whole way. I've met.
Sure, my understanding that the grading issue is not a possible solution. You can't get around the grading issue, right?
We really
On the
can't.
south.
That's correct.
You can build retaining walls, but the reality is you still got to be able to get somebody into their driveway.
Right.
And so topographically, you've got to deal with tying back their driveway no matter what.
Right, tying the driveways in, it can be difficult. In this case, the driveways are going above the road across from the Trouts, and I think you're looking at a maximum 15% grade. Is that correct, Lee?
Some are greater than 15.
Some are greater than 15. That's about as far as you want to push it.
I don't agree.
Really, just moving the road an extra 3 or 4 feet. Suddenly, we're tying a driveway down in the middle of somebody's garage. That's
Well, and you're giving
not
them such a
doable.
steep driveway that, it'd be a bear. Anytime
Now,
there's-
that
and that's what we don't
could devalue somebody's property.
Okay,
So,
I hadn't heard the answer. Thank you.
all right.
Daryl,
I would like, I'm sorry, Mr. Green, I wanted to mention something. You were talking about the 8-foot grass strip. What everyone has seen so far, that 10-foot path is pushed up against the back of curb over about 750 feet of the Trout's frontage. That was in order to try to conserve as much of the front of their property as possible, even though so much of it is right-of-way. We're still just pushing it away to try to address their concerns. There's also a very large tree, oak tree, is that correct? Between their home and Saddle Ridge Drive that we want to make sure we stay out of. Rather than have the trail move back and forth between 8 feet and 0 feet off the back of the curb, we just pushed it up against the back of the curb and left it right there. TDOT, you've got to keep in mind, TDOT has not reviewed these plans yet. With what we're showing right now does not have that minimum 5-foot lateral clearance, lateral offset. So they may come back to us and say, you've got to have at least 5 feet.
Or lose your funding.
No,
Or-
or have a guardrail.
Or a guardrail.
Or a guardrail. And I'm not sure that a guardrail would be appropriate.
Well, I think a
They-
guardrail would be hideous.
Oh, yeah, we all know it'd be awful. I think it would probably be a concrete barrier, because try to imagine being on a bicycle and hitting the back of the guardrail. I'd rather hit concrete than,
The concrete barrier's taking up what?
well, that's taken up
2.5 feet?
2.5 feet,
Which is what you need for a grass strip at the very least.
right.
Because it's 2.5, it's 5 feet from the edge of road.
5 feet from the edge of the roadway, the travel lane.
So you get
The
2.5
curb
feet of
gutter's
credit.
2.5, yeah.
Okay, for the curb and
So
gutter.
it's-
Now-
it's somewhere between 2.5 feet and 6 feet is what our requirement is, so.
Yeah. Now, it's another thing to consider is what that 5-foot clearance is for. It's not because it's not for aesthetics. What do kids do on bicycles? They fall off. What do I do on a bicycle? I fall off. I want to have some place to land between the path and the road. If we don't want anyone falling off their bicycle and rolling out into the travel lane.
For clarification, Everett Road's been brought up in a lot of different ways in comparing this project to it. The 8-foot path on Everett Road, is that correct? It is 8 feet?
It is 8 feet.
How was that approved? And,
That was our standard at the
Okay.
time. Well, it still is our standard, I think. But it's considered greenway, not a shared use path.
So the difference is, since Everett Road has a sidewalk on the opposite side, TDOT allows us to shrink that path to 8 feet.
Well,
versus if you only have one
Everett Road did
sidewalk
not.
/ trail,
Right.
you have to have it 10 feet?
Everett Road did not have federal funding. It was purely the town's funding.
Okay. Okay. No, okay.
It was also designed around 2007.
Okay.
On that subject, what's the comparison? We have a drawing up there that's showing the proposed Union Road. How does it compare with Everett Road, the width and the sidewalks? Trying to give me a picture. I mean, I've been up and down there a bunch of times, but
Right.
I'm not quite sure I know the
Everett
dimensions.
Road is two 12-foot lanes with curb and gutter,
So that's 29.
3-foot grass strip, and on the northern end, it's two 8-foot greenways.
What's that add up to as a total footprint?
48 feet. It's 48 feet of no trees. It's 48 feet of, woohoo, let me drive down this really fast.
Well, that's important to me because I've heard the residents mention several times the comparison that they aversion to not wanting Everett Road. So I'm trying to get in my mind. And it sounds like, especially if we put trees along an 8-foot border, that we would not be duplicating Everett Road. And I'm a little bit, we're kind of on a spot here because I've heard folks say we want more trees. Then I heard somebody say, well, we don't want to plant trees on an 8-foot strip. So I guess I'm in favor of the trees too. And I think that would shrink the footprint a little bit visually, mentally.
Well, I think.
And help reduce speed, I think. If you see
Right.
that border of trees a little closer, you're not, like you said, out on the highway, you know.
I think what we've heard on so many of our other projects, it is that visual ocean of asphalt. If you look at Old Stage Road with the bike lanes and sidewalks, it's a very wide footprint. And I think this one, with the 8-foot grass strip and street trees through there, it will really break it up, and it will retain a much better feel.
One of the speakers talked about our proposal for tree planting. Okay,
Right.
is that in the budget for now?
We maintain a fund for the planting of trees. I mean, we have tree planting, I guess, every November,
That's
December.
a part of the.
It will not be done as part of the project.
We can commit that it will be done.
But we can commit that it will be done.
I mean, shortly after, not 6 years after.
Well,
but-
you need to do it in the winter. I mean, there are some
Yeah, it
things
would-
that you need to.
If
first
the
winter.
project is completed in, say, March, April, May, June, something like that, we're going to wait till November to plant anything.
Just to add a little bit more, basically, TDOT gives us the option of 2 5-foot sidewalks or a 10-foot shared use path. If you put 2 5-foot sidewalks in there, they're going to expect to see some bike lanes in there because they're expecting multimodal transportation. That's why we got funding, because we were offering vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle. So as soon as you divide that up and say, okay, we're just going to put in a 5-foot sidewalk. Okay, then you're putting a 5-foot sidewalk on the other side. Okay, then you're adding in 4-foot or 5-foot bike lanes. I'm not even sure what they require for their bike lanes. So,
Again, we'd be going in the wrong direction.
yes. And if you're going to put in 2 5-foot sidewalks, why wouldn't you just combine them to one side so you can put trees on the other side? Particularly, in fact, in the case of here, because we've got more than 95% of the houses are on the north side. That's where everyone's going to be coming out of. You can make that comment that we're just going to put this on the north side, and then you can tree both sides. All of those properties on the south side, from this roundabout to Hobbs, except for one, are zoned commercial. Now, I'm not sure that they'll ever develop commercial, but they are zoned commercial. And if we're planting trees now, we're giving all the residents on the north side this growth and this cover in case, and ensuring against something going in on the south side that's commercial, they'll at least have that protection. And I've reviewed with Ellen Zaviska from the Transportation Planning Organization about how we've designed it and the fact that the residential's on that side. And she looked at it and she said, this is a good plan for how that Union Road has developed with the vast majority of the residents on that side. She appreciates where we did the crossing in Saddle Ridge because you have 2 options for mid-block crosswalks, either at Saddle Ridge or at Hobbs. The Hobbs-Union-Fleener intersection is a lot trickier for a pedestrian to kind of figure out than they would be at the Saddle Ridge. So that's why they crossed it there, because we have to get them across to access the trails that are on that side of the road. We had to figure out where to put that. So I worked with Ellen for that crossover, and we have a 20-foot easement over there, so it worked out well.
One other thing, I mentioned that TDOT may not allow us to move the path all the way over to the back of curb. They may not allow it anywhere. I know at Fox Run, we pushed it up to the back of curb right there at Brochard Boulevard in order to save planting area within the right-of-way for the Fox Run subdivision.
And I have a question about that because I've talked before, I talked with Ellen about the turning radius into Fox Run.
Right.
Not really pedestrian friendly, but more you're trying to balance the vehicular people coming in and the visibility of the pedestrian and the pedestrian be able to see what's going on. That one, I don't know about pulling it back 2.5 feet. I don't know if it needs to be back a curb or if it can come in 2.5 feet.
Personally, I think it would probably, if there was, say, a 2.5-foot grass strip right there, it might be a little safer. If somebody's going to fall off their bike, it's going to be in that jog and that can also be planted if the subdivision wishes. It'd have to be low vegetation. I mean, that's what the subdivision does now.
I like the idea of putting the, working with Fox Run to put in some, a sprinkler system into the island.
I think that could probably be done, at least conduit to get a water line over there.
The other question I have is it was a concern they're expressing about the Blatts, and it's hard to tell from this where the property line is, because I agree, I wouldn't want a trail coming right up to they have a fence there.
Right.
So it doesn't really make sense to have a trail right back of their fence.
We would
There needs
need-
to be a grass space in between the back,
Right.
on their property line and the trail. And then there needs to be spacing, obviously, from the road, and it's hard to figure from these drawings what that dimension looks like. Is there enough play in there to consider pedestrian safety, but also consider that the Blatts don't want to have a trail right up against their fence?
Against their fence.
Okay.
I can't say with certainty, but I don't remember it being, there's
Right,
some room.
Well, okay, I know that the construction limits, it's in Phil right there, and the construction limits come right down to the fence. So the back of the trail is not at the fence. It's got to be offset from it. For one thing, there's got to be a 2-foot lateral clearance on both sides, minimum,
Yep, of the trail.
plus the 5 foot from the travel lane.
So you're looking at least 2 feet. No, well.
You're saying from the
no,
back of
that's
the trail to the fence, that their requirement is you have to have 2
You
feet?
would still have to have 2 feet
A minimum,
there.
minimum
Yeah.
of 2 feet.
Daryl, give us a little review on right-of-way. What right-of-way is, what's in that right-of-way, why we have to have right-of-way?
Well, right-of-way is, it's the public's property that is used for maintaining the roadway. Most of the time, utilities would be placed in the right-of-way. It just allows the public entities, the town of Farragut in this case, to go out and maintain what's out there. Usually, when there is a subdivision of property, the developer is required to dedicate right-of-way based on the classification of the roadway. So you'll see, and this is a good example here, there are roadways in town where the right-of-way might be shown as 15 feet off the center of the road in some places, which would be just right at the back of the ditch, and in other places, like at the Trouts, it's 30 feet from the center of the roadway because their property had been subdivided. So the public owns that 30 feet from the middle of the road to the right-of-way line. Now, easements, slope easements, when you build a road, of course, you have a slope that either goes down into their property or goes up into their property. Anything that's outside the right-of-way, there's no infrastructure on that slope, but the town is required to purchase slope easement. And it's usually rated at about 70-80% of the fee simple value. Beyond that, there's another 10 feet of construction easement. That's really just for working room.
Just the temporary construction easement?
It's temporary. Both slope easement and construction easement, the property owner owns that.
And when you get through with your the work that you're doing, you restore that to the condition it was before.
That's true. In this case, we'll be sodding everything, all the slopes.
Daryl, I've got one on the traffic light. I think there was Mr. Burkhart
Yes,
and Mr. Rothman both mentioned that concern, and I think if you can.
I wanted to
touch
hit on that. Yes, the traffic signal at, is it Ivy Farms Lane? Is that what it's called now? The roadway through the Swan property?
Official name for it?
It's Ivy Farms Road.
Ivy Farms Road at Kingston Pike. Development of the Ivy Farm itself, the residential subdivision on the north side, that is not projected to warrant a traffic signal at Kingston Pike. When the Swan property develops with commercial, it will most likely warrant a traffic signal, especially with the Ivy Farm already developed. I have no doubt a signal will be warranted there with build-out. Kingston Pike is a state route. We can't just go out and put up a signal on Kingston Pike. We have to have TDOT's permission. And they will do a warrant analysis to determine if a signal is warranted there. It's not a matter of we just want a signal. You have to meet those warrants, traffic volumes, turning movements, that would require a signal. Again, I have absolutely no doubt a signal will be warranted there at some point. But TDOT waits until the traffic volumes have reached a point where it's warranted, where it's demonstrated in the field. We did a count, and this is what we got. They don't want to do it based on a projection.
That includes Old Stage Hills as well.
And that will include Old Stage Hills.
So both of them.
Right.
Darrell, I have another question. Mrs. Bowles, I think it was, the last one to speak, that lives at the corner of Union Road in Everett. She spoke about several wrecks winding up in her yard.
I know there was one really pretty bad accident out there. I think that I think you had mentioned that.
Ms. Bowles, can you come up, because the people at home can't hear you.
I can't give you an estimate as to how many wrecks happen, okay? Because I work. But at one meeting, when all of this started, and for whatever reasons, I don't know why, but I will take pictures because it's like nobody believes you. And I handed them out to every person up here. There was, and yes, this happened before the Everett Road project, but it's not to say it can't happen again. And there was a girl that thought a vehicle sitting on Union was going to pull out in front of her. She swerves and she rolled. Now, that too should tell you the speed. Maybe a lot of it, people are not paying attention to the vehicle in front of them. There was one, this has been a few months, and there was one night, and I tried to get a picture of it, but the only camera that I had was on my phone, and it would not take good. But one night, and luckily, I was walking back up the sidewalk with my two dogs from taking them out for the night before we all went to bed. And I heard a screech, and I turned and looked, and all I could see were headlights coming at me in my yard.
Well, the reason I'm asking, Mr. Smith, I just wanted to know if the town's aware of this issue and what considerations, if any, are.
We hear of accidents all the time on all of our roads, but I've been made aware of one or two myself at this location. That doesn't mean there's not more. We just haven't heard about it. Mm-hmm.
The problem is, it probably needs a circle there, but because of the grading issues there, you can't put one, you can't get one in.
Okay.
Because it would be like that.
The roundabout?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
And excuse me, but I mean, I have inquired about stop signs, a red light, but traffic flow, you know, it's like, well, who's going to sit at a red light
Well,
when nobody else around?
Again, with a
Wondering if any
signal,
thoughts being given to this during the construction.
with
of
a
Union
signal
Road.
or a four-way stop, it always has to meet warrants that are outlined in the MUTCD. We can do a traffic study, and I know Kimley Horn has done counts out there. We'd have to look at turning movements, though. I'm certain a signal would not be warranted there. Doesn't mean we wouldn't look at it, though.
Well, I'm just thinking that surely with more traffic anticipated on Union Road, that the likelihood
It's
of
just
more
like
is gonna
the
increase.
Ivy Farms Road at Kingston Pike.
Yeah.
When it becomes warranted, we'll move forward on it.
Right. Thank you.
I know that with Union Road, Is that going to help that at all? The improvements of Union
Peterson.
Road into Everett Road, is that going to help at all?
Yeah, anything
With-
being done to address anything of that. We'll have more traffic.
Increased traffic's gonna make it worse.
No one's going to get out on Kingston Pike.
It's, you would have the circle would be like this.
Come up to the microphone.
I'm sorry, I can answer
Grade
questions.
issues is why you can't put a circle at Union and Everett. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I can answer that. Grade-wise, you would never be able to achieve proper grades that are that you really have to have. You have to have visual sight across the roundabout, and I don't know.
We looked at it, you lose sight distance, and it's steep grade to steep grade, and it's just not an ideal spot. It's not even a.
And the Bowles front yard would be devastated with the
Bowles
roundabout.
front yard would be devastated. The one catty corner to that, I don't remember his name. Mark
King.
Mr. King.
Mr. King.
His yard would be definitely devastated. We would be probably buying a house out there to do that, and it's just not. It's not really feasible.
The only thing that I do want to get back on Union, but the only thing that I could see in the foreseeable future at the corner of Everett and Union Road would be a four-way stop.
I
think that's the most reasonable.
Yeah, I can see that as a possibility, and we can look into it.
May also help to try to force that Everett Road traffic to slow down.
We want them to stop, not just slow down, if we have a stop sign there.
Right. I agree.
I do hear that occasionally when people say, well,
It'll slow them down.
if we put a stop sign, they don't all stop, but they will slow down. That's a much more dangerous problem.
There were some comments made tonight about the concern that this new road will push more traffic over to Everett Road, and I can't disagree with that. What traffic calming measures could we implement or have been implemented that would help try to force some of this traffic to use that new access, we'll call it the Ivy Farm Road, directly out to Kingston Pike, even before the light is built?
Traffic calming on Union Road?
Traffic calming on Union Road to help
Other than
mitigate some of the folks that are making decisions to try to get into town. We'll call it into town, whether it's going down by the high school or going over to Turkey Creek Road, to try to get those folks to use this new road, which really is designed as a point where folks can be able to egress and ingress and make an alternative route other than pushing all this traffic down in front of Fox Run.
I think that ship has sailed. Actually, the idea of putting, first off, traffic calming on our collectors. Our policy does not extend to collectors, to major collectors. I would have to say, I would have to say that TDOT and Federal Highway Administration may have an issue if we use federal money to build a brand new road and then introduce elements to keep people from wanting to drive on it.
What rationale did we, not that I advocate putting a whole bunch of landscaped islands just because of I think that it's not just the cost of the islands, it's the cost to maintain the islands. But what rationale did we use to be able to implement the islands on Grisby Chapel? I mean, I think that we used all town funds was the major thing. We didn't use anybody else's money.
Those were considered traffic calming, but it's not an object in the roadway lane, in the travel lane.
Of course, the reality with that is then we're just making the road wider again wherever the island occurs. So it may slow down traffic or inhibit somebody's decision making, but it is exacerbating the problem of having this real wide road profile.
Periodically, people run over those islands and take out all the plants.
Well, they do.
It does happen, I'm afraid.
How much are we putting into this?
We need you to come up to the microphone, please.
Why can't
We
use
need
that
you to
money?
we need you to come
Was
up to the
there-
microphone.
Do you want to turn it back over to public
I'd just
input?
like to ask a question off of that, please. It seems like we're really inconvenienced a lot of residents to put through this farm, which I'm not opposed to doing the farm, but why And it seems that the driving force is the state money that we're getting for the road so that we can inconvenience everybody. So why don't we just take whatever the little funds were that we were and do a little modification on Union Road, not putting all the walkways in, not making the big side, just make it a little bit nicer road where none of the residents are inconvenienced. Still have your Ivy Farm Road going up there, which is fine. That's what everybody wants to help the village as well as Ivy Farm. But forget the state fund. We seem like we're really tied in a knot about the state fund, and everybody else is being inconvenienced. Let's think about the citizens for a second. Let's just take some of that money. I don't know what it is, and I'm sure you can do a little bit of road work, make it each a little bit wider, forget the multi-purpose, forget taking down the trees, and have some happy citizens. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Were there any other questions?
I have a question. One of the comments that was made was the classification of Union Road as a collector or whatever it was compared to another type of road. One of the speakers asked that question, and I don't think I've heard an answer to that.
Well, the town has, for many years, I know I've been here 19 years, well before that, has considered Union Road a major collector on our major roadway plan. The state's classification map identifies it as a collector as well. Now, a collector is it's not based on necessarily on volumes. It's based on how it serves the adjoining properties. If you have several properties, say large farms that will develop into subdivisions along a roadway, you know that that roadway is going to be eventually collecting vehicles from those other properties. We'll collect them and take them to an arterial. So Union Road is definitely a collector. And once the other development occurs, it's definitely a major collector.
There's going to be an increase of traffic there will be an increase of traffic on the east side of East Union Road. People now come down Smith Road from Loudoun County. You can go out and count Loudoun County cars going through. So they don't want to go to Kingston Pike. And I think you're probably going to have the same thing here. It's going to be more traffic on the East Union Road too, and more on Smith Road. A lot more. How can you get people to go to Kingston Pike?
Chairman, I got one more speaker. I have one more, just whenever.
Yeah, supposedly that's why they're coming down Smith Road now, is to avoid traffic signals.
Yeah.
Mark has somebody else that wants to say something.
Yeah, I have Scott Meyer that's signed up to speak.
Good evening. My name's Scott Meyer. I live at 12824 Stall Drive, and I have the honor of being the alderman for the North Ward residents who are here tonight. And I appreciate all of you coming out very much. Vice Mayor Pavlin, I want to thank you and Darrell for the hard work that you all have exhibited in trying to get the number of exceptions that we've incurred over the past year. I think Commissioner Myers has summarized my perspective that I've experienced since being elected alderman August 2nd, 2018, pretty well, in that you basically came to the conclusion I have, Noah, which is the residents think that a 53-foot wide road profile is too much. End of story. These folks here, I've talked to a number of them. I can give you a lot more names of North Ward residents who feel the same. So I want to encourage the commission as we make decisions that we keep that thought in mind, that the residents believe the current road design of 53-foot wide path, road and path and curb and gutter is too wide. It's too much of an impact. I also asked Commissioner Myers, I also asked the question of town staff, what are the minimum requirements to keep the TDOT money? Because obviously that's a good, wise thing to do. We want to keep the TDOT money. Thank you, Vice Mayor Pavlin, for answering the question fully. We don't necessarily have to have a 10-foot wide multi-purpose lane in order to keep the TDOT money. We could, in fact, do 2 5-foot sidewalks. And I just want to make sure that we all understand that there are other options besides a 10-foot wide multi-purpose lane when it comes to keeping the TDOT monies, which I think is the question that you asked.
You're leaving out part of your equation.
A part of
Put the 5-foot sidewalks in, and you got to go back and accommodate a bike lane in that roadway.
Yes, let's talk about that. So, and I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Well, here's the takeaway. We don't have to be tied into TDOT monies in order to protect the way that we live in Farragut. And so, although I appreciate the hard work that we have instilled trying to find exceptions to keep the TDOT monies, the Vice Mayor made a comment, we don't have an option but 11-foot wide lanes. I would argue that we do. It might not include TDOT monies, but we don't have to be constrained because of TDOT monies in a way that impedes our life. I also want to encourage the Commission to put a lot of thought into this decision, and I know you will because you're fine folks. You're volunteers just like I am. We're projecting vehicle volume to be 5 times what it is currently. That is, to me, a lot. I don't know about y'all, but a 5 times increase in the volume of vehicles is hard for me to understand. So this is going to take time. And I'm going to encourage the Commission to make sure that you've given the residents time to digest this design, which I don't think they have. So I'm going to encourage you all not to vote in May on this design, but to give us time to digest and talk, because it's a very impactful road design that we're all going to have to live with for the rest of our lives. Also, just real quick about the Everett Road, I had a good friend of ours, a teenager, was trying to cross Everett Road on Union, and she was broadsided by a sheriff, and she did a 360-degree turn. And I know a lot more of the stories, maybe not that dramatic, but I want to make sure we all understand that, in my opinion, Everett Road is a speed trap. It's not a speed trap. It's a speedway. Thank you. That it could be very impactful and harmful to our residents. So I just want to encourage you all, again, to make sure that you've given the residents of Farragut, the North Ward, particularly Saddle Ridge, the Trouts, and Fox Run, the amount of time that they need to answer the questions that I think Commissioner Myers really asked very astutely, which what are our options? Thank you.
This is Kevin Riley again. Just a comment about the 10-foot multi-purpose path. You know, you made a lot of progress. You've asked for exceptions or variances or whatever. If you don't ask for a narrower path, whether it's 6 foot, 8 foot, whatever, in the design, when it gets submitted to TDOT, you won't ever know if you could get it. And so I energetically ask you to ask for a variance for the width of that path at a minimum. The whole width of this thing has been greatly talked about. The citizens here, I think, are speaking quite energetically about the width of the path of that. And so every foot you can narrow this thing down is a benefit. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Tim Sayers, would it be possible to get a map put back up there that shows this multi-use path? In particular, I'm interested, I've heard there's some sections of it that currently are designed right against the road that may, based on TDOT requirements, may have to be pushed away from the road further into somebody else's property. And I'd love to see where that is on the map. So if we could pull that up.
It's on right away. It's not on anybody's property.
Okay.
Do you have other questions?
We're looking for the map that we had up with all the colors on it.
It probably doesn't have the detail that he's looking for. It just
We do
I have them here, but there's section by section by section.
We have the present proposed layouts. Mark, if you'll
Does that show enough
Yeah,
detail
that's
on
the
it?
western half.
No.
Western half.
Can you go forward, Mark?
Yeah, let me see here.
Next. That is the present layout at the beginning. Hobbs Road is going to the south.
It's the westernmost.
That is the proposed layout in front of Saddle Ridge and Hobbs Road.
Mark, you want to show that crosswalk next to Saddle Ridge?
Yeah, the facilities on the south side there is.
Where is it, Trout's property?
Right here. This
Let me highlight this. Basically, of course, Hobbs is here, and Union comes into it perpendicular. The walking trail is on the south side of the road here, and then it crosses over just to the east of Saddle Ridge Drive, and then it is on the north side of Union Road from that point east.
Now, that is a mid-block crossing. I'm not really crazy about mid-block crossings, but it's probably at a location that has less activity than what's going to be going on at Hobbs Road at the intersection of Hobbs and Union.
That would be a mid-block crossing too.
That's more or less a mid-block crossing. The way it operates right now, it's a through movement. I mean, there's not a stop there.
So then, let's see.
You can see there, that is in front of the Trout residence. We've pushed the path right up to the back of curb in order to accommodate as best we can through
Which
there.
may or may not be approved.
And that may or may not be approved.
If they put the sidewalk, if they say we have to have a barrier, you'll still have to have a grass strip, right?
Well, I don't think we would have to have a grass strip at that
Barrier?
point. The problem is a barrier is going to take up about the same amount of space as 2.5 feet of grass.
To me, a barrier is
And
a
that's-
deal killer. I mean, that looks like
That
an
would just
interstate.
be, that would really be ugly in my mind.
And are there other sections where it would be against the road, or just
Uh,
by the
Up,
road?
There's
up
one
near
right
the,
there.
up near the Dean residence,
Yeah, there's one by the roundabout right there.
right. In that location, there is a stream that's running parallel to Union Road, and they're trying to stay out of the stream.
Well, would that be considered severe restraint?
That's debatable, I think. Now, in my mind, the 30-mile-per-hour design speed may allow us a little bit of leniency on the minimum 5-foot clearance, but it's still a question mark.
There's another section on the blacks at Fox Run.
Right there at where you have at the box culvert over Little Turkey Creek, the box bridge.
Do we know if we're going to have a separation there? Because obviously that's a bridge.
Sorry.
It comes right up to the back of curb there.
Yeah.
That's the question again. I'm sorry. I was reading about.
On the
some other
bridge, are
questions.
you going to require, because it's a bridge, are you going to have a barrier between the pedestrian facility and the?
We're going to go back and look through some of the areas that we set the trail against the road. We did it in areas that, like we discussed the Trout property because we were trying to limit the impacts. We did it across the box simply to keep the box narrow. The longer the box, the more expensive it gets. And we have as far as TDEC's concerned, there's a minimum length that you can have a box before you start incurring costs.
Just for clarification, he's referring to a box, what the rest of us
Box
are calling
bridge.
a bridge.
Sorry, box bridge.
Yeah.
The area to the west, there is a known stream there, so we're doing our best to stay out of that. I don't know that it would be considered an extreme constraint. It's more just an environmental consideration to save money for the town. I mean, because that generally costs money when you take a stream, you need to give one back, basically. So,
Would that also be a NEPA concern?
yes. So part of some of these areas was simply to lessen impact, lessen cost, get through the NEPA process. Now, to your question about, we're going to have to revisit some of those areas. We're doing the best we can, and we left some areas like that where we felt like we had some argument to be made. But, I mean, since the beginning of the development of these plans, new guidelines that are a lot more specific have come out. And there's more stringent guidelines than when we originally did some of these things. But
Are we grandfathered under the old guidelines, or we still have to fall under the new guidelines?
No grandfather, but we left these in as an attempt to limit impacts because we felt we had some argument to make. But that doesn't guarantee that they will stay the way that they are. Jimmy answered that, but because I did find the email.
Daryl, do you have any indication at this point of timing of getting all of this to the state? Or is that something we're still
Well, that's a lead question there. As far as getting this submitted to the state for NEPA approval, I think if revisions are minor and we can bring this back to the Planning Commission in May and you guys are okay with everything, they can wind it up and submit shortly after that. Again, Lee, if you want to cover the length of time for NEPA approval.
I would echo that depending on the need for revisions, I mean, we're in a place as far as our environmental documentation that if we could wrap these plans up, I don't know the exact time, but I mean, probably within a month we could have it submitted to TDOT if you're talking about NEPA approval.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
Anything else?
One more question. Question about the Ivy Road where it connects with Way Station at Kingston Pike. Tonight, I believe, is the first I had heard that the traffic signal was not going to be part of that road when it was connected to Kingston Pike. And now I'm hearing that Ivy Farm has to be developed, Swan Farm has to be developed, then you have to go to the state, then you have to do a traffic study, then you have to go to the state and ask them for a traffic light. Can someone give an idea from the time that the Swan Farm would be fully developed, how long after that we might expect a traffic light to potentially go in there?
We have to do the commercial also. That's the commercial part.
The traffic impact study that we reviewed, Planning Commission had, with development of both of those, they felt that it would be warranted, not with just development of the Ivy Farm, but at some point with development of the Swan property, the commercial area, that would trigger the need for the signal.
Help me out here. This is tied to traffic count, not to specifically to the development progress.
That's true.
Right?
But as the Swan property, the commercial area is developed, whoever is developing at some point, I mean, they're going to be submitting traffic impact studies to show the trip generation that they're going to create with a new grocery store on the property. There will be a traffic impact study. If that shows that it will be warranted.
Traffic studies, not to completion of particular parts of the projects.
Right. There may be, there will be at some point with the development of that. It's not going to all develop at once, I don't think. But at some point, say a grocery store, they would have to do another traffic impact study to show what they're going to generate. Add that in to the Ivy Farm. They would be required to fund a traffic signal. We would make the request, but TDOT is not going to give us a permit until we can actually count the vehicles.
This process is consistent with every other traffic light that we have in town.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
And that is because it is a state route.
Correction, every light we've got on Kingston Pike, right?
On Kingston Pike, that's correct. And the interstate.
And probably Campbell Station, Concord Road, those are
Concord Road
state
is,
jurisdiction.
yes, Concord Road is a
State route.
as well.
Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any more questions or comments?
I'm going to throw out an idea. I I started thinking, well, the 20%, we took 900,000. We're not going to get very far taking $900,000 and doing anything with what has been called for years a goat path. But here's an idea. What if we pulled the walking trail 3 feet from the back of curb to provide the minimum 5 feet of separation, 2 feet of curb and gutter, 3 feet of grass strip, and then we planted the trees just on one side of the road? Does 5 feet of additional road diet, it would meet the TDOT and the federal funding requirements. It would address some concerns with some of the grading and maybe some slope easements. It's not going to feel quite as big. We're going to have trees on one side instead of conceivably on both sides, because I would not advocate planting trees in a 3-foot grass strip. I personally have done it, and I cut them down 20 years later.
That sounds awful.
But that is an alternative.
That is an alternative, but I think the visual aspect, you're going to see when you push that trail 3
Close
feet
to the
off,
road.
close to the road, the whole thing is going to look a lot wider.
It's gonna
In
go
my
from
mind, it would.
27 feet to 37 feet, but there's certain areas where there is no controversy. In front of Ivy Farms, and you have that 8 feet there. I think it's one of those things where you kind of got to look at where you are. Can you fit an 8-foot grass strip here? I would hate for us to get this far and then surrender having the opportunity for a tree-lined street. Where we're looking for the where you're looking for the negotiation is in the size of the path, not the 8-foot strip. That's a pedestrian. Anyone who walks on that, and this is who we're designing it for, people who walk on it, are going to have a much more enjoyable experience with an 8-foot grass strip with a tree over them than 3 feet from. That's the problem with Everett Road. You're 3 feet from traffic.
I think the challenge is here. I'm hearing residents that are not advocating for what the plan is. I'm hearing residents that across the board don't want this plan. Now, the reality is anybody that says that Union Road is okay as it is, and I'm not hearing that at all. We all know that it's not okay. It is not a safe road. I mean, I fold my mirrors in when I go down Union Road. Now, I'm lucky that I can push a button to do it, but I'm sure lots of people have lost mirrors and mailboxes and all sorts of things down Union Road. What I'm trying to do is, if we could remove 5 feet out of the profile, would that reduce the impact on homeowners? And yes, it would. Now, if there's a trade-off. You're going to lose trees on one side. Does that lose the rural character of the road? I don't know. Maybe it does lose the rural character of the road, and so we're defeating the purpose.
Yeah, and one of the comments was to keep the rural essence of West Farragut. I mean, I heard that strong.
Yeah, that was.
You're also forgetting, this is not just, and I get it, that these are the people that are directly impacted. This is a community asset. Not just people on Fox Run and Saddle Ridge and potential Ivy Farms are on this, walking on these trails. It's McKinley Station and Camden Grove and Andover. I've heard a lot of them are very excited, even though we had some vocal people. They're very excited about having connection to this area. It's Split Rail, it's Fox Den, it's Sedgefield, it's Orchid. I mean, the ones you're building in
Cool Springs.
Cool Springs. It's this whole corridor. And what we're looking for in what that corridor is going to be, you have neighborhood convenience commercial at Swan Farm. Eventually there'll be a light there, which gives you access to Renaissance, which is office, and the people that are looking to be close to where their office is and they want to ride their bike over, and the what's that called?
Farmers Market?
The farmers market. There's these opportunities here to make this a very walkable area. Walkability is not about smacking a 5-foot sidewalk 3 feet from the street. It's about an adequate facility. It's about quality of place, and that is very important. And it's about destinations. That has been identified on our future land use plan as an activity hub that makes this whole area, Union Road corridor, if we get it right, a very marketable area. People want to be in that. People want to have that. That's what you're seeing. A lot of people are looking for those amenities. You're seeing that advertised on people's real estate brochures when they're close to trails. They advertise that on their real estate brochures. So I understand the concerns. I would certainly rather see us try to work with the path, but I think the tree lined on both sides. People keep talking about this 57 feet. 16 feet of that is considered grass. On one side, you don't even have pavement. You have houses. It doesn't even look like part of the, really, when you look at it, it's 27 feet of trail or road, 8 feet of a grass strip, and a 10-foot trail, because the other side just has houses and driveways that pull into it. From a driver's perspective, that's not even part of the roadway. That's their front yard. That's the people that live there. That's their front yard. So we're looking at 37 plus 10, 47, plus 8, 45 feet. And 8 feet of that is grass with trees.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really compact design. I think we should look at the shared use path. I would hate for us to negotiate on this separation. It's pedestrian friendly. It makes for a beautiful, we're losing all those trees anyway. It makes for an opportunity to bring that beauty back to that road. That putting it too close to the road is going to compromise any opportunity of bringing traffic calming and having a.
Definitely the trees are out. Trees are out if you shrink the grass strip.
6 feet is, what I've heard is the minimum you want to see for a street tree. And 8 foot is, you're going to have an opportunity for a tree to grow to maturity and have a chance of surviving.
Daryl, we're here. I'm sorry. I know my voice.
I'm hearing the speaker above.
I know, I'm a ventriloquist. Would it be possible to find, I'm a very visual guy, so I really like to see stuff. Is it possible to find an example that will look something like what we're planning to do, or to get an artist's conception of what we're trying to do? I think, in my own mind, I really feel like this is a pretty pleasant design, and it might be helpful to kind of be able to visualize what this is going to look like. Either by finding another example somewhere in some other town, or somewhere, or to find an artist's conception.
Mark, can you put this? Maybe we can just pass this down.
Okay. We don't have the old-fashioned overhead projector anymore.
We will in a minute.
This
is not. Keep in mind that has bike lanes, and it also has a median. It's probably not a great example.
The problem is, to me, this is what we have at Everett Road. And so this is,
you have a wider. I'm just referring to this area right here.
Well, maybe it would be nice. Probably the road that we have designed here probably doesn't exist in Knox County because of all the pushing and pulling and the tweaks and the variances and so forth. But if we did have a three-dimensional drawing with cars and people on it to put it in scale,
and with the proposed trees in that 8 foot strip, I think that's an important. And I don't mean like 1 year old trees. I mean 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
I do think this is significantly better than Everett Road and Old Stage Road. I do think there is a great alignment and there's a great profile. I also hear a lot of residents that are still upset with it, and I'm trying to say, is there a compromise that can be found? The reality is that there's been a tremendous amount of work, which I've not been a part of, but a lot of work that's gone into the design of this behind the scenes that has already shrunk this profile significantly multiple times. Is that fair to say?
I think that's very fair, yes.
Okay. And so I think we've got a good plan. I also think that the public and the residents, and especially the residents that are here tonight, and the residents maybe that couldn't be here tonight, don't really understand of what this profile looks like because they see just the new projects that have been built in the town, and this is not representative of those projects.
In one thing, I know Lee has just told me he's confirmed they can provide a rendering type drawing. You'll recall the one that Vaughn and Melton, your competitor, by the way, gave us for Virtue Road. You know, with,
Yes.
with
There you go.
dogwoods and
There
a
was
couple
lot
of
things that we
redbuds.
looked at there. Mrs. Trout, we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you would come up to the microphone, we'd appreciate that.
Are we going to go back and forth?
Well, I mean, I think this obviously warrants some discussion. I know it's a long night. I'd kind of prepared for it, and residents have taken time out of their schedule. Let's hear what you have to say.
I just want to know what specialist has said that a mature tree will grow in an 8 foot? Because I've personally called a tree specialist, and he told me it was very hard with asphalt, concrete on both sides. And I know that the trees are in Smithfield?
Smithfield.
They've had a lot of trouble. They've buckled up the sidewalk. They've had to cut some of them down.
Well, I think those are in 5 feet.
Okay.
I tried to do them in Vista in 3 feet, and it didn't work.
Didn't work.
I regretted doing it.
Well, he just told me that 8 feet would be very hard. I do know that the trees are growing in Fox Run. I'd like to know what size
That's bigger than 8 feet.
Yes. And I'd also know they are growing in Saddle Ridge, and Jack and I personally measured, and that is 13 feet.
I do know from experience that arborists use specific species of trees that do better in urban environments with asphalt and sidewalks. If we plant the wrong tree there, i.e. I know a maple would be the wrong tree to plant there, the way the root system grows, that's the wrong tree. So I do know that there are experts. In my mind, it's an arborist, and I do think we can have those questions answered
Well, maybe I need to
by an expert.
I need to get the one that I talked to come speak next.
Yeah, we'd love to hear because what we don't want to do is go through and spend a lot of taxpayer money and plant the wrong tree.
I did ask, I went to a stormwater symposium, and I asked that specific question because you had asked that question, and I said, is 8 feet sufficient to grow a street tree? And he said, I'd be thrilled to have 8 feet. We do 6 feet. It was a City of Knoxville arborist. And he said 8 feet should be sufficient. Obviously, it depends upon what kind of tree.
I guess it depends on who you're talking to, too, because one's going to say yes, one's going to say no.
Mrs. Trout, what are your thoughts? How important are the trees? Let's just say we had, irrespective of what grows and what species and how many feet, how important are the trees to you along Union Road?
The trees are important, especially the one that's close to 200 years old, and he's also told me you get in the drip line, you might as well kiss it goodbye.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I am an educated person and realize that when you start widening the road and you're going to lose a lot of trees. Now, losing every one of my trees in my front yard is a hard pill to swallow because of the size of this project coming over into my yard. I agree with pardon me if I tell it wrong, Rothman. I agree with what he said. I got to be fortunate or unfortunate, the one that started this. And so I really feel like that everyone, you're impacting a lot of people, not just the ones that have residence or live or have property on Union Road. We're talking about 2 large, huge subdivisions that I feel like a lot of them did not even know about this tonight. In fact, two couples that are here tonight, I stopped and asked them, did you all know that there was a meeting, or called them today? They didn't know about it. So they are here because of me. So
I did want to say that Saddle Ridge neighborhood.
I hate this. We need you on the record. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We've got people at home that are watching, and they couldn't attend tonight.
I wanted to say I'm Cynthia Galentine.
And an address.
Pardon me?
You know your name and address.
Cynthia Galentine. I live at 237 Saddle Ridge Drive, and I wanted to say that Saddle Ridge residents were notified of this meeting last week. So we sent out
residents were notified, and we had a neighborhood meeting on Monday night.
Notify the ones that truly live on Union Road.
And I try to notify you, but you don't have an email. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bowles. I apologize.
Wait, please. If you're going to talk, please come to the microphone.
My son was in a ditch on Friday. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My son
And
was in
our
a
meetings,
ditch.
our meetings are every third Thursday of the month, and it's online, it's in the paper. So our meetings are posted with the agenda, people should know what's on the agenda. So there's several different methods of finding out.
Well, I'm sorry, but I am old school. I do not have email. And there is an envelope and a stamp, and I'm sure somebody around here is paid that they can top it up and mail it out.
Do we have any more questions or comments, Daryl?
Can I go ahead and finish, if you don't mind? Again, I would just like to say, Mr. Myers asked me, and so I was going to answer his question. I do feel like that the residents in the subdivisions and the residents on the street, the owners, we bought here years ago. Saddle Ridge and Fox Run have been around for a long time. Me personally, I was there before there was ever a town of Farragut. And I just feel like that as far as new development, new land, which is what you have with Ivy Farms and Swan, that I appreciate your vision toward doing what they, but then I think that you all need to find a balance and be respectful and to the people that have been there before you were ever in existence, and also since you've been in existence, that we have all been good citizens of the town of Farragut. This is why we bought here for this reason, or why we moved here or built here. I think if you ask everybody, there's a reason why they chose here instead of possibly on the other side of Kingston Pike. And I think that needs to be factored in, and you need to listen to their concerns and their feelings. And if it is, as Mr. Rotham, I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
That's close.
Said, okay. You can butcher mine up the next time. Has said, then if it is TDOT money that seems to be the problem here, and it all comes back to TDOT money, and you're tangled and tied up, then maybe you need to step back and say, do we really need TDOT money to do this project? To be respectful to the people that have been here. This is an all new land. It is an all a new development. Then maybe you need to step back and look at it. And connectivity, I appreciate your connecting the subdivisions. They will all be connected. You've got connectivity. And I think the road needs to be taken care of, but you can do that too without the overkill design.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to respond to the previous comment about notification. We do put it in the newspaper. The agenda is on the roll screen. It is on our social media. I would also point out in the letter that we sent to all of the affected residents and sent to the HOAs of both Saddle Ridge and Fox Run, we pointed out that this would be presented at the April meeting of the Planning Commission.
It's insane.
I'm not sure what other notification we need to do short of knocking on doors. Well, I can appreciate your comment. Thank you. But I do want to say that we have not ignored notification of the residents out there.
They just want that property tax.
Thank you.
Just ignore leveraging money.
Just one comment. I want to thank you, Commissioner Green and Commissioner Myers, for your idea about the artist rendition of what the road should look like. I will tell you, I failed. The pathway to hell is paved with good intentions, and I have tried multiple times to educate the residents of the North Ward, particularly Saddle Ridge and the Trouts and Fox Run, on what this design might look like. And it's been very difficult because that picture doesn't mean anything to most of us who are lay folks. And so I echo your request. I've actually asked the town staff for our artist rendition and it didn't really go anywhere. So I'm going to ask again and kind of echo what you both suggested. It's really important that we get that artist rendition of the road, you know what I'm talking about, that they handed out. Fox Run has a meeting April 30th for their subdivision. It would be great to have that picture so that we could take it and show it to the residents, because that picture is going to be much more meaningful than the blueprints and things like that. We'll work with Saddle Ridge if they want to do a town hall meeting. We can do that as well. But it's just been very difficult to try to educate folks based on blueprints. So can I get a commitment that we will get that artist rendition of this design in the next 2 weeks?
Probably come from our consultant in the back, which I've gone blank on his name. Okay.
Okay. In 2 weeks, next week? Okay, fantastic. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay.
Trees, put some cars, people pushing strollers. I mean, like that brings it into scale. It would be nice to actually have something in a three-dimensional drawing.
It's so much more helpful for a layperson. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Since you're an alderman, I'm interested in you as an alderman.
Okay, great.
And I've heard, and I'd rather address it to you because I've also heard a comment from some people in the audience.
Sure.
About now we're throwing down on this TDOT money concept. One of the core concepts of this town since its founding is to leverage the money so we don't have a property tax.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in where this nearly $4 million that you suggest that we ignore TDOT funding leverage is going to come from.
So obviously you didn't hear what I said. I said that there were different options besides TDOT monies. And what's interesting is after I said that, Mr. Whiting, Commissioner Myers came up with a nice compromise. So
specifically tell me what they are. I'm addressing you as an alderman, but I'm not trying to
So
be citizen.
I can tell you as an alderman, my philosophy is this. I'm not going to impact 62 or 625 existing residents who are not pleased with the road design for monies at this time. Now, I'm happy to sit down and maybe look at other options that would keep the TDOT monies. But what my challenge is, and my comments are based on wanting to encourage you all to think outside the box, as Commissioner Myers did, and you obviously aren't able to do, which is basically come up with a compromise that keeps the money, if possible, and keeps residents' desires in place, especially those who already live here. So thank you, Commissioner Myers, for coming up with that compromise. Thank you.
Very political answer.
If I could make a comment,
Answer whatsoever.
Mr. St. Clair,
Yes.
there's an $8 million line item for McPhee Park in the budget. And that's been agreed that's too much money. And so if there's an $8 million line item for McPhee Park, which is a community amenity, it's a great thing. So how much money do you need out of McPhee Park to do this job? It's a reasonable question. So
I only asked where it was going to come from. I didn't say it couldn't come from there either.
well, where does the $8 million for McPhee Park come from? Can you answer that?
I'm not a part of the board of mayor and alderman. They're the ones
Okay.
that vote on the budget.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, I guess you should ask them about that. Mark, if you could put back the schedule for me, I have a follow-up question to Mr. Sayers' comment about 45 minutes ago.
The timeline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are about halfway through the engineering phase. And if we're not considering a traffic light at the Ivy Road, and construction starts in 2021, how many years do we have to be late to getting our children to school, to getting to church, while we're waiting for people that are traveling this road after 2022? How many years do we have to be inconvenienced? And I'm not asking a rhetorical question. I would like, it's going to be 4 years. It'll be 2026, or it'll be 2024. I'm serious about it. How many years do we have to be inconvenienced? And not just these people out here, but those people up there, and your families too. It's a fair question to wonder how long we're going to be pushed.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
We have approved the mass grading for the Swan Farm property. I think one of the developers are here tonight, but that's something that they'll start that. That house has to be removed. They're going to be putting the road in. All that's going to be done. They've got townhomes going in on the backside there. Once that's mass graded, I think, I'm pretty sure that developer, Travis and that group, will be looking at some sort of a plan to get commercial property in there, because that's a big piece of just open land. Chances are pretty good that you're going to have commercial property there pretty quick once it's mass graded and people start looking at it and they start trying to push the development area. I think Noah had some stuff going on there once before, and there was quite a bit of interest then, and I think there'll be quite a bit of interest in the future. It looks like that's going to be like what Vice Mayor Povlin said, that is going to be an activity hub. I think the commercial property will start there pretty quick, and quicker it's there, then the quicker we can get good traffic counts.
But it is ultimately completely dependent upon the developer of that farm and how quickly he can move with the commercial development and attract tenants. So it conceivably, my best guess is it's going to occur before Union Road's construction is complete. But it's possible if we hit another recession and he can't lease his commercial space, he can't create the warrants that are necessary to get TDOT to give their stamp of approval for a light. So there's not going to be a simple answer to your question. I wish there was, but that's it's completely dependent upon the commercial development.
Charles Landon. I live at 858 Burchard Boulevard in Fox Run.
What was your last name again?
Landon, L-A-N-D-E-N. I want to thank you all for taking the time. I want to thank you, everybody, for the design. I'm sure it takes a lot. I know that you all have, at least to this point, listened to the residents to some extent. I would just urge you to continue to do that. I mean, I think the design of Union Road as it stands is what we've seen and what we understand. I think it's overkill. TDOT money, no TDOT money, I mean, I think some things can be done. I think there can be some exceptions. I think there can be some alternatives. I think there's always alternatives. And I appreciate the fact that you, Mr. Myers, have presented some potential alternatives. We could think outside the box. But I think having a rendering would be great to give us an idea, to be able to see that. And I just think there's a lot of people that are going to be affected along Union Road. I mean, there's a lot of property that's going to be taken out. You know, I don't mind Union Road so much the way it is. Do I think that it needs to be improved? Do I think it needs to be changed? Yes, I think there could be something done to it. But I think this is overkill. What we've seen, what we've been made aware of, has been overkill. Let's give the public time to digest this. Let's have some drawings. That's great. I'm glad that we're going to have some drawings. I would urge you all to hold off on that vote. Give the public a little more time. Get those drawings out there. Give the public some more time to digest this. You know, I realize that the meetings are made public, you know, but this is upcoming on a holiday weekend, as it's been mentioned. Give the public some more time to digest this. Give the public some more time to have some comment. And I'm just urging you to hold off on any kind of vote that's going to impact the people that came to Farragut in these areas to have that feel that it is now. Because I know it's been stated, Everett Road is just, it's a disaster. I'm not so much talking about really the way that it looks, but the way that people drive on that road is dangerous. And Grigsby Chapel with the traffic calming islands, they honestly don't do anything other than make people that are dodging in around the medians that have to dodge in really quick before they drive over the islands. To me, I drive down that road quite a bit, and it doesn't really seem to slow the traffic down. If you drive 40 miles an hour on that road, the speed limit, you're going to have somebody right up behind you. If you drive 30 miles an hour on Everett Road, you're going to have somebody behind you probably flipping you off because you're going the speed limit. Union Road, even at a 30-mile-an-hour design speed, will likely be, the way that I've seen the drawings, and it will likely be very similar. So when you take about 5 times or more the projected increase, it's going to be, there's more that can be done and looked at. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, we need to take,
We're about ready to finish this item up. We can do it right after. If we're about ready to finish this item up, we can do it right after that.
I would like to make a comment, please. I answered Mr. Sinclair is a possibility for, you asked for other funding. Several years ago, I can't tell you how many, the Ivy property was up for sale in the town of Farragut, so that the developer, if I am correct or incorrect, was to redo the road and the bridge in order for them to do it. They walked away because of the cost. My suggestion or a thought would be that we talk with the developer, the town's money that we would put with TDOT, not getting TDOT's money, but to take Union Road and maybe widen it 2 to 4 feet on each side without doing all this other, without impacting any of our neighbors or residents, but having still a rural road there. All we're doing is adding 2 to 4 feet, because I think that's pretty much what you need for a rural road without a freeway going through there. The developer can add a few $100s or whatever it is to each of his houses, and I'm sure that if he's willing to go and put this road in with a roundabout, then he can certainly help the town and take that money that we were going to put with TDOT and put this in. Let's don't impact our neighbors. Let's have a good community. Let's be rational, and let's put ourselves in the position if it was our property, if this was our situation. It's like when I go to the doctor and they're looking at my wife, and I asked the doctor, I said, well, who would you recommend for your wife? Well, hopefully he liked his wife, but I'm just asking you on the same thing, is put yourself in the position of these people. We don't have to all, we can take their money someplace else, but let's take and do the right thing. Thank you.
break for tape now.
Are you finished with the item?
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments? In that case, we'll move along to, this was for discussion only tonight. And again, you can check check online, you can check in the newspaper. I think it's both the Sentinel and the Farragut Press has our agenda in the paper.
It's also on TV.
And on TV.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sign up to have agendas, when a new agenda comes out, you can get it in your email that there's a new agenda out, or texted to your phone.
Okay. Do you do that by, Louise, how do you do that?
Go to the website and you click on agendas, and on the right, Town of Farragut, you go to the right side and it says notify me,
That's for zoning.
and you click on that and you can get notification.
Okay, thank you. We have to do a break for tape here. Just changing the tape, and then we'll re-adjourn in 5 minutes.
Re-adjourn. Yeah.
Re-adjourn.
This lot, it does connect to whatever happens on Union Road, but again, so it's kind of an isolated section of sidewalk for one proposed house lot, so that's something to think about.
Do we have to grant that variance tonight?
It could be requested. They have a representative here that could request that, and then we could make sure that gets incorporated on their application. I don't know if they were confused, but they did note in their comment response letter that they were planning to go ahead and build the sidewalk, and they can do that. It's just, historically we have considered relief on a situation like this where it's just, essentially one house lot that's involved in the subdivision in question. So the other comment was the access onto Union Road. And we do have 3 people that have signed up for this item, and it might be related to the access. It would be a driveway access. Obviously, they'd have to coordinate that with the Union Road improvements. Since it's a proposed access onto a collector street, it would have to go through you all, and you'd make a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So that's something that we have as a remaining subject to as well, to coordinate that proposed access and make sure that it is the most logical and safe location and is coordinated with the Union Road improvements. So that's all I have on that one. I don't know if y'all have any questions, and if not, I'll go through the 3. Speak.
One comment to make. I would not really want to see a sidewalk built there. Reviewing that part of the road with Ellen, we talked about the opportunity for putting a facility on that side. It would require someone crossing Union Road at Everett, and we just talked about how terrible that intersection is. To put a pedestrian in that intersection is unconscionable. I don't think we need a sidewalk on that side, the bowls, or to that property. I know that we kind of want to look at any the possibilities where that trail comes out on the other side, but I would not want to direct people towards having to cross at Everett and Union because it's such a pedestrian hazard. So that's my position, and I would think that a driveway access really, because we have an entrance and an exit, that's going to be a tricky thing to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's for the engineers to figure out.
Is Annette, are you representing the owner or applicant? I have a question about the wetland determination specialist. Are you all okay with coming up with that person to do this?
Yes, Annette Hummel, Site Incorporated, 10215 Technology Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah, they've got somebody working on that now.
The aquatic buffer ordinance says in there currently that ultimately the determination has to be made by the Corps of Engineers or TDEC. So I think we could do whatever their specialist proposes if there's a mechanism for presenting that to one or two of those, either of those entities, that would suffice with the language of the aquatic buffer ordinance. But it does state that. I know we've had wetland determinations from outside of those 2 entities in the past, and they basically presented their data and findings to a representative of, my recollection was a Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers for their review, and if they're in agreement with it. And so.
Does anybody on the Planning Commission have any questions for the applicant?
Annette, you and your applicant's thoughts about the sidewalk one way or the other? I guess what I'm kind of hinting at is if you don't want the sidewalk, we probably officially need you to make a request for a variance.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we have a variance granted to remove the sidewalk requirement from the south side of Union Road along their property frontage.
Which is pretty typical what we've done with some other very simple subdivisions, especially 1 or 2 lot subdivisions in the past. And I think you're also hearing that based upon the plans on Union Road, your sidewalk doesn't make any sense there anyway.
Right.
You will have to take action on that before we take action on the plat.
Have you gotten far enough to envision how the house would sit on that site, facing which way?
I don't have that information.
Are there restrictions on where you can put the house based on that 100-year floodplain line there? Do you have to keep above that, or how's that work?
Is it 2 feet or 4 feet above
4 feet's our
4 feet.
freeboard. Yeah, the finished floor elevation has to be 4 feet above the base flood elevation
The 100
in the
year.
town. That's our freeboard. Our level of measure of safety is 4 feet.
elevation.
4
And with the
feet
crawl
above.
space, that would not be
Elevation
difficult to
above,
do that.
not
Yes, that's right.
beside. Okay.
The basic
Looks like that lot's getting smaller and smaller to build on.
It'll have to be at the corner.
Yeah, a lot of it is in, like I said earlier, in the floodplain. And,
The other thing that I'd like, an observation maybe to the applicant,
Too much experience.
you've got a lot of road frontage there. Might be a good candidate for a circle driveway instead of trying to have one access point and force feeding it to tie in directly across from Brochard. I would not want to see them have to try to back out
Yeah.
onto Union. So they're going to need plenty of room. And like I said, you've got tons of road frontage. Might have to get a little creative with grading and staying out of the no-fill line area. But a circle driveway might be a real good candidate there. But those are some things you're going to want to deal with on the front end as Union Road's being designed.
Right.
yeah, the 3 speakers that signed up are Dennis Dean, Mike Rothman, and Russ Buchanan.
My question was answered. Mine was answered, no.
Thank you.
And mine's probably close to being answered. I'm Dennis Dean. I live at 12715 Union Road. The biggest question I've got is, with you building the house, how much fill are you going to have to put in to make sure that it stays out of the floodplain? Because part of that is floodplain. And if you're having to fill it, where are you going to get the dirt or rock from? And if it's coming from the Swan property on the other side of the creek, how are you going to get from there to the east side of the creek without going down Union Road?
Annette, this is all on you. There's a lot of questions there, which are pertinent questions.
Short answer is I don't know. But I know that Travis has been sensitive about construction traffic going up and down Union Road, and I know that he'd be willing to work something out to make everybody happy, or try to make as many people happy as possible.
How much fill can actually be done in a,
There's the town has a regulation of it has to be engineered and reviewed and approved, of course, but between the floodway and the 100-year flood fringe, you can potentially fill up to 50%.
The outside 50%.
Yes, right.
I will say, just as an aside, we still have building going on in Fox Run. So we're still seeing builders come in to Fox Run and build houses there. So, I mean, at the very least, they could be coming Kingston Pike, Everett Road to Union, which is the more improved of the section anyway.
The reality is this proposed lot meets all of our requirements. There are some subject twos that has to do with the wetlands delineation. We've talked about the sidewalk, but it meets all of our requirements, the zoning. It's a big lot, although doesn't necessarily have a huge buildable area, but it is definitely buildable.
and we do the variance first?
Work on the sidewalk.
Yes, you would need to take action on the variance first.
Okay.
Variance for elimination of the sidewalk on the south side of Union Road due to the size of the subdivision, of the action we're taking
Simple
on the
nature of the
property.
subdivision, something like that, Ed?
Yep.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So we'll move along to the
plat.
the final plat.
And actually, part of that would, given the variance, let's see here, the letter of credit dealing with the completion of the pedestrian facility obviously wouldn't be relevant, that portion of number 1.
Can I ask a quick question? You guys, I know on KGIS, and you mention it in number C note 11. On KGIS, it shows that little sliver it's a lot. But when you look on the deed on KGIS, it doesn't make sense. I don't know if you guys, have you seen that?
I've seen that, and that lot line would be dissolved as part of this plat process. I'm not sure how that lot line got in there, but I mean, it could be from 100 years ago.
Well, my question is really, when I pulled up the deed, because when you go on KGIS, you can click on the property, and it shows the first page of the deed, and it starts to describe it. To find the point of beginning, commence at iron pin located at the east right-of-way line of Everett Road. The east right-of-way line of Everett Road is
A long way
on the other side.
on the other side of the Bulls house, right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if maybe somebody just kind of put it in KJS wrong,
Well, I see that a lot.
because the church is on the other, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church isn't that property over on the other side? Because
It's all the way down at Smith Road.
That's, okay. It just kind of, it's very confusing. So that has happened before.
Yeah, they're picking it up on this plat, and that it would actually be dissolved. Annette, is that the correct
Right.
Okay.
the civil engineering terminology?
Okay. I just wanted clarity in case, I guess it's not my problem at the end of the day, right?
Something different when they resolve the lot line?
Right.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay, and so we need to eliminate the letter of credit for the
facility, yeah.
pedestrian facilities from the requirement here.
Basically, only two subject twos will be left in there is the wetland determination and coordination with the Union Road improvements.
Well, just, in general. That's right.
So I'm going to move to approve with the amended subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming in
Thank
and
you.
staying with us.
She's got one more item.
Okay.
We got to let Richard finish up, though. He's waited.
Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Campbell Crossing, parcels 84, 84.01, and 87, tax map 130, southeast intersection of Fritz Road and North Campbell Station, 10.17 acres, 22 house lots, zoned R-1, OSR, Fred Long Construction Concept applicants.
This was actually presented conceptually as a workshop item back in September last year. Property, as you may remember, was rezoned to open space residential. It is on the east intersection of Fretz Road and North Campbell Station Road. A lot of it's surrounded by property that's not in the town to the south and the east, or south and the west. The particular proposal is just it's a cul-de-sac, as you can see there, with a sidewalk on one side of the street, and then walking trail connections and easements that would go ultimately to North Campbell Station Road. The applicant has requested 3 separate variances from the subdivision regulations that we'll need to act on individually prior to taking action on the final plat, or preliminary plat, excuse me. So if any of y'all have any questions on the plat, I can try to answer those first, and before we start discussing the variances. They did move the street further north. Most of the property on the south end kind of drops down, and it's the more heavily wooded portion of the property. So that's now left as part of the open space. There's kind of an open space lot that goes around the periphery of the subdivision. So it's a design that fits well with the open space residential overlay, because it does allow those more undevelopable portions of the land to be factored into the 35% open space. So the variances he's requested, and again, they're all interrelated, really. The first one is from the maximum length of a cul-de-sac, which is 500 feet. The justification for the variances deal with the shape of the property. It's narrow, kind of like Brass Lantern off McPhee Road. It has the topographic considerations on the south portion of the property, and then It's really close to the intersection of Fretz Road and North Campbell Station Road. So, getting another access even onto North Campbell Station Road through this development would be very close to Fretz Road and wouldn't actually even meet our distance requirements since North Campbell Station Road is a minor arterial. So for those reasons, they're requesting the variance to allow the cul-de-sac as shown on the preliminary plat. And the staff does support this variance for those reasons.
Anybody have any questions, the applicant?
I do. Richard? The front half, I will actually call it the northern half of the subdivision, your stormwater goes into a detention pond.
Correct.
The southern half of the subdivision down by the cul-de-sac, it looks like that water is going to be discharged undetained. Can you give me that's just an unusual scenario, and maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, that's not the case. Going into a bioretention swale that is retaining the water and then as well as filtering it and discharging it.
Okay.
Enhanced soil.
Now, do you under? I'll get you back on the. So that's exactly what I was going to ask you. So that's a bioswale that you're going to undercut and create some volume underground with that. Have we adopted stormwater quality for residential subdivision?
No.
I don't think you have, no.
No.
Is your rationale in doing that? It's just the first time I've seen it in a subdivision, in a residential subdivision.
We're doing it to keep from disturbing. We had a detention basin shown there initially.
Okay.
And it was taking in that large swale that's coming down through there, and it was disturbing so much area that.
That's the wooded area?
Right.
Okay, I didn't have a tree plant on here. So this was a way to save some trees?
Exactly,
Okay.
that was correct. The town took offense to my other detention basin, so we removed it.
Well, we've got a lot of big detention basins in the town, so
Yeah, I understand.
I can understand. Okay.
On the drainage pipe, it goes underneath your proposed road to your detention pond up on the top side there?
Yes, sir.
What size is that?
18-inch.
18-inch? That's all?
I think so.
They're all 18-inch. Everyone's 18-inch. Some are obviously concrete in the right-of-way and HDPE outside the right-of-way.
The rest of that road, it's not picking up the entire road.
Okay, okay.
The rest of the hill is about 150 feet uphill from that basin.
Okay.
So
It's where? It's probably about right in here somewhere.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's the high point of the road.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any more questions or comments?
I'm going to make a motion for a
Well,
variance.
First, let me ask first, are you okay with all these subject twos, then?
I am great with everything, and it's a pleasure being here with you guys this long. I've enjoyed it.
That's on
Okay.
the plat.
Okay, we're ready for our motion.
I'm going to make a motion for a variance from subdivision regulations for maximum length of cul-de-sac of 500 feet due to the shape of the property, the topographical issues to the south, and the proximity to the intersection of Fretz Road and North Campbell Station Road.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The second variance?
Yeah, the second one deals with the width of the street. It's a local street, so the minimum width normally would be 26 feet. They're requesting a 24-foot wide street due to the short length of the street, and the number of dwelling units that would be accessing the street. And the staff does support that reduction. It does provide for enough on-street parking should that become necessary. And we feel that given that short of a street that 24 should accommodate the needs there.
Move for approval of the variance from the width of the street from the required 26 feet to the proposed width of 24 feet due to the short length of the street and the number of dwelling units associated with this subdivision.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then the third one is from the requirement to have more than one access into and out of the property. As I mentioned earlier, the best portion of the property as far as environmental, trying to save the best quality, tree quality and so forth is on the south end, so that kind of limits your connection option there. The county is to the west, southwest, and then you have some topographic issues to the east. And as I mentioned earlier, providing another access to Campbell Station Road is not particularly helpful. It's very close to that intersection. So, and there's also less than 30 house lots proposed. So, for all those reasons, staff would also support this variance request.
Mark, when we adopted that in the last year or so, I thought we automatically exempted developments that were less than 30 lots.
No, it's just one of the criteria that we could consider if someone were.
Oh, that was a criteria, not an automatic.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to move for a variance from the requirement for more than one access into and out of development due to topographic issues, the shape of the property, and its proximity relation to the intersection of Fretz Road and North Campbell Station Road.
Second.
And the development will have less than 30 houses.
Okay.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for staying with us.
Now
and
the-
away.
On the preliminary
Plat
plat.
itself, yeah. Plat
It's
itself.
always fun, you know that.
One never ends.
And the staff recommends approval of the plat, subject to the 12 comments noted.
And they're all still,
Outstanding. Working on those, Richard.
Yeah, we're good, yeah.
Motion to approve the plat subject to the 12 comments as noted.
second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on preliminary plat for the Ivy Village subdivision, portions of parcel 58, tax map 151, 7.16 acres, 34 house lots, zone NCC, OS-P, and FPD, site incorporated, Annette Hummel, applicant.
This item was talked about last month as a workshop item. We went through some things for you to consider in the design and the transitional aspect of this portion of the Swan property. This is the north portion of the Swan Farm property that abuts Union Road. Property is a zone neighborhood convenience commercial, and they're using as their transitional element single-family attached development, and that is an option in that zoning district. So we feel that it is a good land use to transition from the non-residential that will occur to the south to the lower density residential that's on the north side of Union Road. This particular design is a little bit unique. We talked about it last time in that the actual front of the houses will face outward and not toward the street. The streets will be public streets, but they will function more visually and functionally, frankly, as more like an alley, and that will come back to the variances that they're requesting for this item. So the front of the houses will face toward Union Road and to the south toward the non-residential development. So it's a little bit unique, and then they'll have the pedestrian facility that would otherwise be required along Union Road. It will be separated back into the development. And I think Annette has increased the distance between the sidewalk and the house lots slightly to give that a little bit more of a community sidewalk facility feel rather than a sidewalk that's more of a private facility just for the benefit of the people that live in the Ivy Village development. Again, there's a couple of variances that are being requested here, and the first one deals with the width of the street, both Street A and B. A is the lawn street that comes down to Ivy Farms Road, and B is the one that comes into it perpendicular that will ultimately extend to the south. And this is kind of conceptual of what the street system, street and pedestrian facility system would look like on the full Swan development, because we don't really know how the land area within those spaces is going to be developed. So we do know roughly how the infrastructure is going to look. So that's what it would look like. So that Street B will extend on down to the south. They're requesting a variance from the street width of 26 feet to 22 feet. And again, the main reason for that is they're short street sections, particularly Road A, but they're also trying in their design to create the effect of it being more of an alley than a public street. So to narrow that down and give it that, that more alley type look and feel. They're also proposing, we met with the applicant's engineer and Annette, and they're proposing a couple of raised crosswalks to kind of lessen the desire of people to use Road A and B as cut through, or ways to get from the commercial development over to Ivy Farms Road coming through the residential portion. So those will be where I circled those areas. There'll be raised crosswalks there. That raised crosswalk to the south will actually also act as kind of a transitional infrastructure piece to delineate, where you're leaving the non-residential and entering the residential. And that was one of our comments on the plan itself, is to maybe beef up the landscaping in that transition between the two to kind of give it some separation. So that's the rationale for the variances to the street width for both of these streets. The staff does support these reductions. We've talked this over with the fire marshal. The development has drivable curb and gutter, so effectively, the fire marshal was okay with this because they could mount the curb and gutter should they need to get around due to the width of the street. So again, the staff does support this variance for the reasons noted.
Mark, the front part of the south side of this, where they're proposing the commercial, that is just a proposal right now? That's not necessarily, are you guys building these, or is this just an idea of what you might do?
The road alignment on that bottom piece of property might change a little bit, but that's probably pretty close. I mean, we do intend to bring Road B on down into the commercial development.
Okay.
They had showed some hypothetical development there, but we didn't want to imply that that was something that we would be okay with. So we asked them to just show the infrastructure and how things will be connected generally.
And Ed, I'm assuming that the garages to these places would be at the alley?
They will face the alley, yes.
Yeah. How much driveway do we have there between the garage door and the alley?
At least 20 feet.
Yeah.
That way, so you can park a car without it hanging in the back. So there's room to park 2 cars in the driveway.
2-car garage.
Plus 2-car garage.
They'll have to back out into the road, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're using pavers for the driveways?
Well, we have to provide 25% low-impact development on the side, and that was one of our proposals, was to do the driveways with pervious pavers.
And your detention will be at the regional detention pond?
We'll use the regional detention pond, and also we have proposed on the northwest corner right there at the intersection of Union Road and Ivy Farms Road, a bio-detention basin where we'll landscape it nicely, and that will handle some of the roof water
And
from.
catch some of that uphill side.
Right, right.
Didn't we talk last time, if my recollection's correct, about the access to the mailboxes? Didn't we mention that last time?
Yes, we talked about that and the amount of space,
Yeah.
parking space, and that has marked.
Yeah, they did have 2 spaces
Yeah, they've got-
originally, now they
looks
got
like
6.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we originally had parallel spaces, and we went to 90-degree head-in parking spaces and got a couple extras, so.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
6, about
Yeah, they
7 or
have
8
6.
now?
Six.
Yeah, 6.
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
it helps. Yeah.
Any more questions or comments? Anyone in the audience have any
You have a
questions?
couple of people that signed up for set item number 7. Well, actually 3. Are you all? Anybody else have any? Mike or Russ, did you have any comment on that? Okay, all right, okay.
I have a question.
You do? Okay.
Or maybe a comment. What is the square footage
Let's
of?
have your name again, just in
Oh, I'm
case.
sorry. Mike Rothman, 659 Burchard Boulevard, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37934.
Thank you.
What is the size of these dwellings? How many square feet?
I don't know.
I'm getting pro it.
I don't know exactly what the square footage is. I'm just going from memory, 25 to 3,500 square feet.
Really?
They're 2-story.
Oh, okay. And what's the price range?
From memory again, I
Color carpet.
don't hold me to this. I'm thinking it was 400 to 500, somewhere in there. Does anybody recall? I know Travis mentioned.
Higher than what they were talking about across the street. Is that correct? Is this correct information?
We don't get into
Well,
prices.
We can't speak for that.
Yeah,
We
we
don't
talked
get into
we
that.
talked about it a couple.
Okay, it's not going to be a long.
Yeah,
Okay, that's great. My only comment, which is a comment I made before, is please put a lot of trees that borders Union Road, please. And I would hope that the town, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I am.
There's a planner right there.
Yeah, I know, I'm looking at it, but I couldn't tell because I saw a little bitty thing about a foot across in the base. I'm assuming, but again, I looked at the plat for, the layout for Ivy Farms, and up on that clearing, that showed a lot of trees, but now I understand that you're not putting up, that the developer is not putting up trees up off there. So I just want to make sure that the town holds the developer's foot to the fire to put trees up. It's a great buffer, and it makes the community look good. That's all. I'm sure this is going to be very nice. Maybe it'd be a retirement community.
So that's the first variance request, if y'all want to consider that.
Okay.
Move for a variance from the width of streets, both streets A and B, from the required 26 feet to a proposed width of 22 feet due to the short length of the street and the design objective to create a street system with more of an alley character.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose?
All right.
Variance?
The second deals with the right-of-way width. Normally, a local street is a 50-foot right-of-way. They're requesting a 40-foot, essentially for the same reasons as the street width, to give it more of an alley character, and due to the short length of both streets, the relative short length of both streets. Staff does support this variance as well.
Any questions or comments?
Move for approval of the variance of the right-of-way width for both streets A and B from the required 50 feet to a proposed width of 40 feet due to the short length of the street and the design objective to create a street system with more of an alley character.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose?
And then the plat itself, as I mentioned in the staff recommendations, there's quite a few comments left. We did meet with Annette and go over most of these. so a lot of these are, clerical items. I think that the design-related items are doable. She can speak to that, but I'm comfortable that these items could be addressed. But it's ultimately up to you all as to whether you're comfortable, or if you have any questions on any specific items, or need any clarification on those, and we can certainly try to review that with you all.
Net, this is your opportunity to address any concerns or have any questions, if any, with the subject twos. Are you comfortable with all of these?
Yeah,
Okay.
we do not intend, however, number 13, to have street lighting.
Okay.
Well, that's not a requirement of the town. It's just that if you do have street lighting, we do have some parameters that you got to follow. So
Right. Though, too. It's sitting up.
We could take that one out if you're
Okay,
not.
So we could strike 13.
13.
Hey, everything else we're good with.
Item number 6, the applicants are requesting, excuse me, a setback variance for lot 12. Is that an issue or not an issue?
Hold on, what number are we? My number 6 has to do with landscaping.
I'm on the wrong one.
I'm looking at the most recent staff recommendations from today.
Yeah, that's different than the other one.
The one that's in the packages.
That was one of the comments the staff had on an earlier.
Okay.
It's already been addressed.
That's been
We
resolved.
worked that issue out. They don't need a variance on the building.
That was my question. Has
no.
that been resolved, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
They've resolved that with modifying their design.
I
Yes.
kind of like this. I think it's a novel idea of having the alley access and the front doors
Yeah,
facing
it's
other
interesting.
directions. I'm not sure we have anything really in the town where this has been done like this.
No.
I've seen some things in Nashville that are done like this. I
Wentworth
like
is
it.
kind of like that. It has
Which
an
neighborhood?
alley-like to access the garages, doesn't it?
Some of the units do,
Yeah.
yes.
Like Park Place?
No,
No,
but you're
Wentworth.
still looking at the back of them from Kingston Pike. This one,
Yeah,
if
that's
you're
true.
driving on Union Road, you'll
Yeah,
see the
this is
fronts of
unique,
houses. It'll
yeah.
be really nice looking.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a real nice way to address, especially if
Yeah.
you're driving down Union Road. You're gonna see a nice elevation instead of
Yes.
just the back of somebody's
That's
house.
right.
Yeah.
Garbage cans.
And you're
Well,
okay
Ned's
with all
gone
these
through a lot of
subject twos. Yeah.
versions on this, so.
Yeah. No, I like it.
Move for approval for the preliminary plat of Ivy Village per the subject to, the amended subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have item number 8, discussion and public hearing on a resolution to approve proposed amendments to the future land use map and the comprehensive land use plan updated 2012, recommended by the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Steering Committee related to Outlet Drive and Snyder Road, Town of Farragut applicant.
We talked about this last month as a workshop item. The big changes on both of these are basically converting some areas that were designated as office light industrial to regional commercial. And then also to clean up some of the land use designations to reflect actual uses that have either been constructed or are under construction, or physical conditions that we know exist on each of these corridors, and making the land use map reflect those. And then also there was a couple of office light industrial land uses that would have accessed a section of Snyder Road and North Campbell Station Road that really, in neither case, were appropriate for non-residential development, given the characteristic of the streets. So those are really the changes that are on Exhibits A and B, and the staff recommends approval of Resolution PC 1903. From this point forward, any changes we make to the future land use map, we're going to do it through a resolution. It just makes it more clean and trackable. So, so with that, we again recommend approval of this resolution.
Anyone have any more questions or comments about this one?
None.
Approval of resolution PC-19-03.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item number 9, discussion and public hearing on proposed amendments to the Farragut zoning ordinance to remove reference to elderly and group housing and clustered housing units since the terms are no longer used in the ordinance. Town of Farragut applicant.
This is another item we talked about last month as a workshop. This is just cleaning up some language that is no longer relevant in our zoning ordinance due to some amendments that we made, mainly dealing with assisted living facilities a couple of years ago. So the staff recommends approval of ordinance 19-19 through resolution 19-04.
Anybody have any questions on this?
None.
For approval of resolution PC-19-04, which recommends approval of ordinance 19-19.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 10, discussion and proposed amendments to the Farragut zoning ordinance relating to short-term rentals. Town of Farragut applicant, for discussion purposes only.
As you all know, this is a topic we've heard more about in the last few years. In fact, the state of Tennessee adopted an act in May of last year to deal with short-term rentals. It was discussed at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen's strategic planning retreat in January, and the board members wanted basically to get on top of this and to not provide for short-term rentals in this community. So that was the direction the staff has been pursuing. In March, right before the last Planning Commission meeting, the staff gave a presentation on the topic of short-term rentals, just basically gave you a good overview of that topic. And the feedback we received from you all, the planning commissioners, was basically the same as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, that we just didn't want to provide for these in the town. So at this point, from that point forward, we of course, are working with the town attorney periodically on this, and anything that we ultimately present on this topic, obviously we'll have to run it through him and make sure he's okay with it. But in looking at our existing zoning ordinance, some things that the staff is throwing out for discussion purposes so that we can get your feedback and develop an ordinance hopefully for next time. Are some of our thoughts on tackling this. We do believe that in Chapter 2 of the zoning ordinance, we need to provide for a definition of a short-term rental unit, and that's the definition that I had emailed to you all today is basically the same that's in the Tennessee Code. We also probably need to define what a bed and breakfast is, because we do provide for those in 3 different zoning districts in the town, but we don't define it in terms of how we want a bed and breakfast to be treated in Farragut.
Can you say which zoning districts we allow bed and breakfast?
The neighborhood commercial, the town center district, and the overlay C1.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So there we kind of looked at some other communities' definitions of that, and the state, and got some things in the definition that would clearly differentiate a bed and breakfast from a short-term rental, in that it has to have a daily meal, at least one daily meal. There's a limitation on the number of guest rooms. And the innkeeper resides on the premises, and that's how we would want it to be applied in the town if we permitted a bed and breakfast. So I don't know how you all feel about those 2 terms, or if you have any questions on that. And we also felt that it would be a good time to add some language in our zoning ordinance that clearly spells out what a permitted use is, what a prohibited use is, and as we'll talk about in the next section, clearly providing language in the ordinance that if basically something is not specifically permitted, then it's considered prohibited. And that's kind of always been how we've treated uses that are listed in zoning districts, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have that very clearly laid out in your ordinance. And then maybe modify the existing definition of a family and add in there that a family would not be deemed to be a short-term rental unit. So that's the only addition to that particular definition. So that, again, somebody couldn't, use, that's a little bit of the issue with our current zoning ordinance. The terms dwelling unit and family probably need to be a little more tightly defined so that someone couldn't, loosely interpret that as allowing for a short-term rental situation. So that's chapter 2. Does anybody have any questions on that? Does that all make sense?
So if I have a house and I decide and it's just me, and I decide I want to rent a room out to somebody I work with or somebody I go to school with, where does that fall?
Let's see here.
I mean, what do we call short-term? Is short-term a rental of less than 30 days?
Yeah,
or?
less than 30 days. So that would probably be longer than that. And that under that, it's honestly, it's going to be very challenging to enforce a lot of that, obviously.
That was going to be my
Have we
comment.
had problems with this?
We haven't really had too many problems with that. We just wanted to stay on top of it.
Right, preemptively.
So it didn't become an issue.
I was telling Mark that I saw on, it's what's that website, Neighborhood?
Next door.
Next door. Somebody was looking for a house to rent out for a week this coming Thanksgiving, which is somebody who's a lot more organized than I am.
That makes sense. I mean, so they have a bunch of family coming into town. Well, that might be a problem. I mean, based upon the ordinance that we're drafting.
Yeah. I mean, I think this language would give us some teeth in terms of addressing some kind of complaint. Yeah, like a chronic situation where it's very apparent that they're essentially using the dwelling unit as a,
VRBO,
small-scale hotel,
Airbnb.
basically.
My concern was more once we develop our town center and that becomes a place,
Well, I'd love to have some sort of hospitality where you could have short-term rentals in the town center. I mean, Louise, are you thinking the same thing? Because I wouldn't want to prohibit that.
I was more concerned with the existing houses, the existing neighborhoods, and like Village Green, because it's so close to where town center is.
That's true.
You're creating a problem that Village Green may not want. I know I'm not interested in living next door to a short-term rental, and I don't think many residents do.
Neighborhoods probably have covenants and restrictions, but Village Green may be one of those anomalies where they may not have the covenants and restrictions because for a long time their HOA was a voluntary.
Yeah.
I mean,
They just updated their.
They did.
And I did send them a note that said, "Hey, you can write this restriction into, regardless of what the town of Farragut does.
Right.
You can write this in to your."
CNRs.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if they did or they didn't, but I spoke to the attorney. What was his name? He used to run the Education Foundation.
Jerry Martin.
Jerry was their attorney, so I had mentioned it to him too as well. It's something they might want to consider. I have no idea if they did or they didn't.
As far as the town center goes, any new development, I mean, I'd like to see some sort of, downtown looking, I don't know if it's going to be a Hampton Inn or what, but we would want to make sure we don't preclude something like that.
Like a boutique hotel.
A boutique hotel, something like that.
Yeah, that would be different. I mean, those would be, they're separately defined.
Right.
Yeah.
In tax.
In tax, that's right.
And I think you mentioned, didn't you, Mark, at our session that there were maybe a few that you'd have to grandfather?
As far as we could tell, there appears to be about maybe a dozen.
Yeah.
But, I don't really know. It's. Yeah, that was a snapshot.
Well, it'd have to be some kind of notice, wouldn't there, to the town that they better fess up if they want to be grandfathered.
Yeah.
Probably, I'd say a few of them are probably in violation of those covenant restrictions.
Well, that's possible, yeah.
Possible,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly.
Fess up, they're subject to enforcement.
Well, that's kind of goes to the other two sections of the zoning ordinance that we're looking at. Again, I was talking about maybe making it more clear about permitted and prohibited uses.
I'd like to make a comment on that. That sounds kind of backwards to me.
Okay.
That whatever is
one?
not permitted, it's not expressly permitted, is prohibited. I don't think that's the standard tenet of our legal system. Is that okay with it?
We've used that language in a lot of our other zoning districts over the years.
Yeah.
I hate to call it a catch-all, but that's really what it's designed to be. And we've had to update it from time to time. When we've had uses that didn't exist prior to, we said, well, we never thought of a XYZ. And so we need to go expressly add it as a permitted use. But that is something that's been real commonplace and has been our standard practice for many years, is that exact language.
Well, that's like different than law.
Though it does sound funny, but
Yeah, but can you imagine trying to
No, I understand.
list
but, I mean,
every
it's like our
prohibited
Constitution,
use?
it's like if it isn't
yeah.
permitted, you can't do it. What's that? I mean, most laws are just the other way around. If,
what is illegal? And that's
I mean,
usually
for
what's
example,
spelled out.
My covenants don't say that my wife can have a garden. Does that mean it's not permitted?
Well, you're exactly right, and that's why we have that language
So
in there.
that's why I'm a little. I guess if our attorney is okay with it, I'm good with it. I guess that's where I am.
Well, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we'll run all this through him. But he did mention that as something we probably ought to add in the zoning ordinance, some statements about, really being clear about what is a permitted use, what is a prohibited use.
You can build that in the definitions.
Well, we could certainly define them, but we're also proposing to maybe look at Chapter 4 and Section 4 and add under that, because that section talks about measurement of setbacks, use of lots, that kind of stuff, and just add as an additional term in the title, permitted uses and zoning, and then maybe add something like that subsection E statement, and we kind of borrowed that from another community mostly, but it's pretty comprehensive. That ultimately what it says is if the use is not expressly permitted, then it's not allowed, or that kind of stuff. So that's what we were thinking about doing there, is adding that statement in that section, and then maybe in section X, which is a reserve section in our zoning ordinance for, future sections, we could maybe add a section there that specifically talks about short-term rentals, and it basically says they're prohibited in all zoning districts, if that's what you all want, and then addresses the situation of existing grandfathered units, and that they would be afforded protections through TCA, but they would be subject to that section of TCA that's referenced there. So that's what we're proposing. We would have to, obviously work through the details of how we're going to deal with the grandfathered ones. Like Roseanne says, I think they're going to have to identify themselves, and then we're going to have a system of tracking them and making sure that they're not becoming abandoned, because if they're not used as a short-term rental unit for more than 30 months, then they would be considered abandoned.
And lose their grandfather.
And lose their grandfather status. So we may have to have an annual some type of annual license renewal or something, a process like that.
And you could consider possibly stopping the grandfathering in the event of transfer of the property for any
Yes.
reason.
Makes sense.
Well, and the registry would also create a basis if we do adopt a hotel motel tax. That's part of that registry that's going to be important.
I guess we just want to get your all's thoughts, and if it appears that we're on the right track, or if all that makes sense to you all, the sections we're talking about. And, okay, well, we'll try to put something together in an ordinance format and run that by the town attorney and have it ready for you next time.
Where'd you come up with the 30 months if you abandoned?
All?
That's Tennessee code.
Yeah. Used to be 12 months, and then they changed it to 30.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
But as Louise mentioned a while ago about incorporating some of these restrictions in their HOA covenants, that state law doesn't
That's right.
overrule those.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can do,
It can be more
covenants
restrictive.
can
Be more
prohibit them.
restrictive
Yes,
than state law.
absolutely. Yes, they can. Yeah.
But that's how they bought the property.
The people that are using their homes as short-term rentals, is that for weekends, month? What about?
It's less than
Less than 30
or
days.
less.
Yeah, whatever they're, it's
Fraternity
less than 30
parties,
days.
Something parties that buy the golf tournament and something like that?
Well, I was going to ask you, Betty.
And the intent, I think, is to have something in place that could address a chronic situation. Is really what it is. Because those little short-term things are basically impossible to enforce.
Yeah.
I mean, we just, you know.
Golf tournaments have,
Either way.
where the golfers come in, like the one we have here coming up.
Yeah, they
That's
stay.
a
You don't
free deal.
charge them.
You know, it's
Yeah,
not-
right. There's no compensation. So
We treat them
Does
and key to the house and let them come. and
does
go.
that make a difference, Mark? And do we need to state that about the
consideration.
consideration? Right.
Are they paid?
You're right. Are they paying for it, or is it a?
That's in the ordinance. It's in the definition.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the definition.
Well, but in the event of the golfer situation, I have known some golfers would gift, if you will, the owner, maybe gift cards or some such, that surely shouldn't be considered compensation.
I don't think that's
for rental.
the intent. Is not just to say, hey, we're going to strictly outlaw this. The intent is to give the town the ability, if that there's a problem, i.e., there's a party house next door to you, that these people are coming in and having parties on weekends because it's on VRBO. It gives the town some teeth, a tool,
Right.
to be able to address it, and that's really what I think this is ultimately about.
True.
I think so.
Well, it's also to me a little bit about the health, sanitary. Does somebody come in and clean up afterwards, or am I going into a house to stay
Full
a
of bed
week?
bugs.
Right.
Well, that was my concern, was how do we inspect these things?
I don't think we're getting into that
It's a
kind of.
big issue.
I know,
We don't
but
want
if
to
we
get, but
allow
right.
them, then we'd have to set up this all. That's a
short-term
bigger
rentals.
nightmare to go down.
No, I don't think so.
It's a big issue.
Okay. So,
Work on that. Hopefully have something for you to recommend next time.
an approval of utilities. None at this time.
Well, we got one more
Oh,
item here.
okay.
Sorry. I know it's getting late.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Discussion of amending the
Yeah,
maximum
this is a.
lot coverage formula as applied to the R-1 OSR zoning district, town of Farragut applicant.
This is actually an item the staff's talked about internally for a little while, and it came up again at last month's Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. And it deals with the language governing maximum lot coverage in the open space residential overlay. The formulas that are in that zoning district that determine both the building coverage and the total coverage, if you kind of work through that formula, it has language in there that ultimately bases that on the total number of dwelling units in the development. So, the issue with that was that, does that mean that when somebody applies for a building permit, that their coverage allocations should be based on the total number of dwelling units that are in that development at the time that building permit is applied for. It's never been an issue with us in dealing with this. Obviously, the intent is the total number of platted or planned house lots in the development, because it's kind of absurd to treat it otherwise, because you'd have to change the coverage amounts every time somebody applied for a building permit, and everybody would have a different coverage allocation. So it wouldn't make any sense. But the language does need to be cleaned up to make it consistent with how it's been applied and the intent. So that's what we're proposing by adding, changing the total number of dwelling units in the development to the total number of planned house/building lots in the development. That's always been our intent, and that, pretty much brings that language in line with that. I don't know if y'all are okay with that, or that sounds reasonable. I don't think anybody could interpret that otherwise. The lawyers kind of find creative ways of looking at your language sometimes, and even though it maybe doesn't make any sense, if you take a literal reading of it, I suppose they may have a point. So that's what we're trying to address.
Mark, is there ever a scenario, I guess I could see a duplex sitting on one fee simple lot. So you have two dwelling units on one lot. So excluding that, and I can't really think of, even in the OSMR, or the OSMR, yeah. But where else would you have an interpretation issue between total number of dwelling units and planned house/building lots? Is that the only scenario that you can think of would be like a duplex?
Yeah, I'd like to say it's never really been an issue until this.
Exactly. You had something in the BZA that obviously became an issue, an interpretation issue.
Yeah.
The interpretation was the houses that exist.
Existing.
Not the planned
What it
ones,
was
the
talking
existing
about
houses.
was when they applied
So
for
like
the
you
building
planned
permit.
300, but only 150 exist.
That's right.
So he's using the 150.
That's right, because it's based on the total number of dwelling units.
I gotcha.
In the development. So if you take a literal reading of that.
No, that's what I struggled with. Okay, so why is this an interpretation problem? Now I see why, because somebody can say, well, that's what exists, not what's planned.
Yeah, exactly. Even though if you think about it logically, it doesn't make any sense, because everybody's going to have a different coverage amount based on the number.
I can't believe anybody would ever have an issue with that, because that's all in the plat. That's a recorded document at the courthouse.
That's right.
It shouldn't be open to interpretation.
Well,
it is what it is.
That's kind of our opinion, but we do agree that needs to be very crystal clear.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing.
That makes sense.
Another issue that's come up with this is that when somebody has, and we kind of had this come up with Ridgemore several months ago, maybe over a year ago, if somebody combines a lot, staff doesn't feel it's reasonable to retain the same coverages for that larger lot.
Are you saying you don't get double the coverage just because you have two lots?
That's a question. Staff is concerned about giving them double the amount, because you could end up with a situation where a house, lots get combined, and you have this enormous house that's built that's completely out of context with all the other dwelling units in the development. So I think from our perspective, at least, if we're going to allow for, some increase in the coverage when you have a lot that's combined or re-subdivided and additional space added, that there should be a limitation on how much you can increase that. We were mentioning maybe 50%, and we did some example formulas of what that might look like if you had a 100-acre development with 200 lots, and what that would do to the building and total lot coverage amounts if somebody were to combine two lots. So, in the case of this hypothetical development, the building coverage would go from 4,094 square feet to 6,141, rather than over 8,000 feet. So, and that may be too high, frankly. Maybe 50% is actually too high. And I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on that. The formula appears to be pretty complicated, but actually once you start plugging in the information, it's not really that complex. It factors in the allowable coverage in the base zone, which in the case of OSR is R1, and it's going to be 25 and 35%. It takes 75% of the gross site area. That is the 35% required open space less 10% for infrastructure space. So that's where that comes from. We're not proposing to. We're just trying to create some language that would address a situation where somebody has combined a lot or they have obtained additional land area to make their lot bigger. And how do we deal with the coverage allowances in those kind of scenarios?
Have you or Bart seen that anywhere else?
Yeah, we have a lady in the Battery at Berkeley Park has the same situation where she's combined a lot, and they can't quite meet their coverages based on the allocations for just the single lot. But they're not that far over, so they would clearly fall under, what this would provide for. But they conveyed to us that's why they combined a lot, so they could have a slightly larger house and that kind of thing. So.
Didn't we have something like that with a pool? They wanted a pool or something one time?
I don't know. We've had it come up in Bridgemore. They've combined several lots in there over the years. And
But I was wondering if, Bart, and you're working with other towns.
I don't think any other towns really have anything like this.
But from a standpoint of doing the sort of open space subdivision that you're doing, you typically are creating some sort of formula where you're allowing the developer to capture approximately the same number of lots they would in a traditional subdivision, but with reserving open space. And the way you have to do that is create smaller lots with then surrounding open space, but then you still have the massing of the building on those lots. So this is, the way you're dealing with it is, that's sort of how you're approaching that. The lots are going to be smaller, but you don't want the entire lot covered by a building or by impervious surface. So you have some sort of ratio built in. So it's just trying to balance those numbers. And, right now, if you do combine lots, or say you have 3 lots and you re-subdivide them into 2, there's no pickup in the amount of lot coverage or building size that you get, on those 2 larger lots than when you had 3 smaller lots. And the issue is do you want to provide some mechanism for people to have, the ability to put a slightly larger home or a little bit more lot coverage on those larger lots in proportion to the new larger lot, if that makes any sense.
So you're saying that as it stands right now, we don't give somebody a one-to-one benefit if they... So you tell me, so the person in Berkeley Park that has the extra lot, it actually doesn't help them the way that it's written today?
No. Now, it does change that formula by 1 lot, but that doesn't help.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It changes the entire subdivision.
Yeah. But it still doesn't help them enough to really... Yeah, we just don't have any provision right now to address that, and I think we need that. We've had it come up a few times, actually. We're just, trying to get some feedback from you all as to if you have a sense of how much we would be comfortable letting them, go above a 1 lot allocation of coverage if somebody were to combine 2 lots, or maybe shift the property line to add a third more property to their that kind of thing. So without being overly complicated in what we end up proposing.
And if you think about it, you're looking at, again, the amount of total building area and the total, lot coverage areas that are going on a given piece of property. So it's sort of intensity development.
Total impervious surface.
And amount of coverage area.
Yeah.
And the amount of sort of open space that you're going to have within an area, the massing of buildings and that sort of thing. So if you forget about that last paragraph in the write-up and you just look at the two calculations, basically on a 100-acre site in the OSR, you're going to get 18.75 acres of building footprint on that property. So, right now, when we do the calculation on the front end, if it's 100 lots, then or I should say 200 lots, it breaks out to about 4,000 square feet of building space. And all we're saying is now that number only gets tweaked a little bit by one extra lot or one less lot.
Right.
If you combine lots, and that's hard to track, as opposed to saying, you get 18.75 acres of building footprint on that property. That's what we're really concerned with as a planning commission and as a planning staff.
Mm-hmm.
So, how that's aggregated on the property becomes less relevant. So if you go from 200 lots and somebody puts a couple together, you're just reallocating it amongst those two because you've already spelled it out on the front end. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You're trying to make it a little more equitable to the person that has the one or two lot, the extra lot.
But at the same time, if you buy into a subdivision and all the houses are roughly the same scale.
And then you double the size, right?
Yeah.
If you really want someone next to you to put up twice the house that you have.
Yeah.
So where's the balance point there in redistributing that total building area?
I mean, generally speaking, I like what the proposal about 50%. I mean, it seems like that makes sense. If it becomes a problem, then we could address it again. But it seems like that's reasonable.
Yeah, if you were sitting with a 4,000 square foot,
Mm-hmm. You add the lot, and then you can go to 6.
Would that be too much for a neighborhood? I don't know.
I mean, if it was 30% or a third, it wouldn't be worth the effort.
I agree.
And if you're fine with that, then we can work on the formula a little bit more, because that's for total, it being totally combined.
Right.
But what if you were doing some proportion? So
Well, you could still use the same math. You could same multiplier. That 50% seems like that sure would be a lot easier for staff to implement. Again, if for something we don't see now, it becomes a problem, we could address it again. But it seems like that's a lot, and it's a lot easier to explain to somebody else when you got an applicant coming in, or a builder, contractor, homeowner. Yeah.
And tracking long-term should be easier, because
Mhm.
all we'll be doing is changing the formula or changing the previously allocated amount
Right.
of square footage on a minor re-subdivision plat between
Yeah.
the 2 or 3 lots that are affected, not having to recalculate the entire development.
It'd be a lot easier on the surveyor. I can promise you that.
I think your future anyways is, they're asking for more density, not less. I mean, when you go to the subdivision, they're trying to get as many houses as they can.
Yeah, I think the less density is actually kind of probably good for the community. So, and you're actually going to get a slightly more. I mean, that other 50% actually ends up being more open space.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is not something we want to prohibit accidentally or otherwise.
Okay, well, I think that gives us some
Given
good
that,
direction.
I got a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
The word planned, I was
Okay.
wondering if maybe it might not be clearer if that were platted or something, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, you got to be careful of that, because you have some subdivisions that are done in phases.
Pardon?
And
That's
you have
what
some
he's
subdivisions that are in
right, yeah.
phases.
Yes.
So their total open space is based upon the entire master plan with all the phases. If we use the word platted, that could create a problem. I think planned is a pretty good word under the scenario.
Calculated might be another word. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, plan just seems a little
Yeah,
vague
Bart
to
and
me.
I had that same conversation.
Of
Because of the phasing issue.
Right,
And a lot of the concept plans aren't nailed down. You know, so you got,
Yeah.
you know, you got more shift in there, so.
I don't know what, how you
Okay.
define planned.
Okay.
Right. You know, if we know.
What comes from
the
your
X number of
preliminary
lots,
plat?
How many square footage and.
Or your final plat?
That's why I said platted.
Well, I don't know if you could say, clarify what plan means, because I had the same question myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I was concerned a little bit about planned and how that's,
Well, and that's true, because you
Interpreted.
can, on Ivy Farms, you can have more than the 214 lots that they have.
Yeah.
They calculate more than that, like 230 or something like that. So that's, just because it meets the calculation, that's not what they're planning. They're planning 214.
What
So
about
that
approved?
affects-
What about the word approved? Because that's not necessarily a platted, but that's, you know, that's a planning commission approval. I mean, approved lots.
And then you have to say by whom.
Well, you would. Yeah, because
That's
then
all
some
right.
attorney could have some interpretation issue. Well, you know,
Really?
here we go again. Approved by the developer. You know,
I approve this.
that's
Move
it.
on.
That's what I get.
Are we making an issue out of this that we don't really have an issue with?
Yeah.
Maybe we are.
I think
We
so.
have an issue with the old wording, now we're trying to
Yeah,
get an
there
issue
you
with
go.
But you're adding more now. More questions.
we'll look at the planned language and see if we can do something with that.
I guess the attorney will take care of it.
So, we have no utilities at this time. The April 18th meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned.